Chapter 33:29. After taking 2 consecutive blows from the sky-devouring demon emperor, Yishuan also knew that he would have to go all out in order to fulfill his boast of taking Yishuan down within 3 moves. Therefore, Yishuan would definitely not give him a chance to use the 3rd move on him. The aura on the sky-devouring demon emperor's body was spreading, and it became many times more terrifying all of a sudden. His eyes shone brightly, and the gold-plated phoenix wing pendant in his hand formed a terrifying pressure that swept out towards Yishuan. Yishuan was not to be outdone either. The aura on his body rose to the extreme and began to increase inch by inch. Although he was not a heavenly lord, the aura that erupted from his body was like a small sun, illuminating the entire sky and making it impossible for people to look at him directly. The 2 of them were like 2 suns, rising up in the sky one after another. Yishuan had been deducing all these years. He had been thinking of ways to improve his own trial. He had been deducing the most suitable time to attack. And the time had finally come. He had been preparing since the beginning of the battle. He had been preparing for the most critical moment. This was the moment when the sky-devouring demon emperor would use the 3rd move. This was the moment when his attack power was at its strongest, but at the same time, it was also the moment when his defense was at its weakest. This was the moment when he would attack. Sky-devouring demon emperor, take this feast that I have specially prepared for you for many years. Behind Yishuan, an incomparably huge altar rose up. Suddenly, a gap appeared on this altar, and a terrifying sword intention wave spread out from it. Almost in an instant, it seemed as if the world would be torn apart. Even many experts in the entire eastern region felt the threatening sword intent immediately. Although it was far away, it seemed as if it was going to split them into pieces on the spot. What? What is that? Many emperor lords were dumbfounded. They could instinctively sense how terrifying this sword intent was. It had almost completely exceeded their understanding. Even the attack that the sky-devouring demon emperor had unleashed with the gold-plated phoenix wing pendant paled in comparison to this sword intent. It was simply not an existence of the same level. Whoosh! However, in the next moment, this sword intent left the altar and ruthlessly slashed towards the sky-devouring demon emperor in front of it. Bang! When the sword essence swept out, the first thing it did was to collide with the phoenix formed by the golden dandelion with phoenix wing. The phoenix struggled for a moment. Then it was slashed into nothingness by the sword essence. Not even a trace was left. Not good, damn it. The heaven-devouring monster monarch reacted almost immediately. He immediately sensed how terrifying and threatening the sword intent was to him. Almost in an instant, it had already slashed in front of him. This huge sword brought about a sword radiance that was like a galaxy that came crashing down towards him. It was incomparably terrifying and unimaginable. He only had enough time to retrieve the gold-plated phoenix wing pendant and place it in front of him. Boom! This streak of sword light was extremely sharp. It was like a wild horse that had been locked up for a long time. Once it was released, it could not be stopped and directly struck the body of the heaven-devouring demon emperor. All the defenses on the body of the heaven-devouring demon emperor were like paper in the face of this sword will. They were broken in an instant. He tried to resist it by distorting the laws, but it was of no use at all. It was broken in an instant. Even distorting the laws was unable to deal with this sword will. Wow! The heaven-devouring demon emperor forcibly took on this sword will. His feet did not move, but his body was dragged back by the powerful force. What was even more terrifying was that after a while, he could not hold on anymore. His entire body was blasted away like a meteor, destroying countless stars along the way. He only stopped when he directly hit a huge planet that was millions of miles away. However, the force of his sword did not decrease. It directly pierced through the huge star and then pierced through the universe at an even faster speed. Everyone could only see that after the sword was no longer obstructed by the heaven-devouring demon monarch, it was simply like a hot knife through butter. Everywhere it passed, everyone could see that the galaxy was turned into nothingness. Countless stars in the middle were all turned into nothingness. In the end, this sword will disappear into the depths of the universe. Everyone's eyes could not follow it. In the galaxy of the universe, it was difficult for the vision of an emperor to see everything clearly. They would also be obscured by many strange phenomena in the universe. At this moment, everyone looked at the heaven-devouring demon emperor again, only to see that he was extremely badly injured. His imperial robe had also been cut into pieces. At a glance, he looked like a beggar. There was not a single piece of uninjured flesh on his body, and blood was dripping everywhere. After forcibly withstanding this sword will, he was also seriously injured. Compared to when he was in high spirits, he could not be compared at all. Moreover, his aura was also a lot weaker. Moreover, the gold-plated phoenix wing pendant in his hand had withstood the sword will head-on. There were dense cracks on it, as if it would turn into ashes in the next moment. He was a dignified celestial master, but he had actually been beaten to such a state. Many emperors felt that their worldview had been completely destroyed. It was extremely rare for emperors to be able to cause harm to a celestial master, let alone seriously injure a celestial master. Only a celestial master could deal with a celestial master. This was common sense. It was just like how a quasi-emperor could not contend with an emperor. Their life levels were already completely different creatures. How could they be compared? At this moment, everyone finally understood why Yi Shiwen dared to provoke the heaven-devouring demon emperor, who had already stepped into the celestial master realm. He did not run away, nor did he lower his head. It turned out that they did not know where he had obtained this super-killing weapon. Thinking of the terrifying power caused by that sword, if it had been in the Fortune God dynasty, it was unknown how many lives this sword would have taken away. It was simply unstoppable. Even a celestial master would only be seriously injured by the sword will. It was absolutely impossible to underestimate how powerful it was. He really found a super-killing weapon. However, as long as the celestial master is not dead, it will be difficult for his plot to be realized. He is just delaying his death. Many emperors suddenly, quietly made their own judgment. In their opinion, the celestial master was not only powerful in terms of strength, but his recovery ability was also very amazing. As long as he recovered, Yi Shiwen would also die. The difference in strength between an emperor and a celestial master was not something that could be closed so easily. However, soon, something that completely shocked them happened. They originally thought that even if the heaven-devouring demon emperor was seriously injured, he would be able to recover very quickly. However, he did not recover as quickly as everyone thought. On the contrary, his wounds were getting worse, and there was no way for him to recover. Based on everyone's understanding, even if he did not actively recover, it should not take long for him to recover from this injury by relying on the natural recovery ability of a celestial master's physical body. However, this was not the case at all. The wounds were still getting worse. Everyone opened their heavenly eyes to take a closer look, only to find that the heaven-devouring demon emperor's body had been ravaged by that sword will, and there were still many small sword wills left on his body. These sword wills were still devouring his life force, making it impossible for him to recover. Even if he operated his skills, he could only barely suppress these small sword wills. However, it was impossible to get rid of them in a short period of time. At this time, everyone really felt how troublesome the situation was, and only then did they understand how dangerous the situation the heaven-devouring demon emperor was facing previously. At this time, everyone's eyes focused on Yi Shiwen. What kind of demon was he to be able to do such a thing? It was simply inconceivable. If they were in that sword-intense place, they would have been killed just by approaching it, let alone taming it for their own use. Everyone understood that Yi Shiwen had been preparing for today's battle for a very long time. Many of his trump cards would shine brilliantly in this battle. However, everyone found that they were actually looking forward to this battle. It seemed too boring if such a super battle, which could not be seen even once in thousands or even tens of thousands of years, ended with a one-sided massacre. Only when both sides fought to the death would it seem to be in line with their thoughts. Furthermore, some people thought even further. If Yishuin really succeeded, then the supreme majesty of the Heavenly Lord would be broken. Since ancient times, many legends about the Heavenly Lord would also become nonsense. The rule that the Heavenly Lord could not be challenged would also be broken. Once it was broken, the consequences would be simply unimaginable. Because if Yishuin succeeded, it was inevitable that others would also succeed. Yishuin had a trump card. Could it be that others could not find a trump card? The benefits that could be obtained by slaughtering a Heavenly Lord were simply unimaginable. Some people thought far ahead, while others thought much closer. There was only one thing in their minds, and that was that it would be best for both sides to suffer and perish together. In this case, they might even be able to take advantage of the situation and fish in troubled waters. For a time, everyone's thoughts were scattered, and each had their own ideas. In particular, the emperors who wanted to step into the legendary Heavenly Lord realm were even more excited. This is the trump card that you've been preparing for a long time. After a long time, the heaven-devouring demon king finally spoke. His voice was hoarse and unpleasant to the ears, just like an owl. He stared at Yishuin like an injured beast, revealing an extremely dangerous aura. It's indeed amazing. The heaven-devouring demon emperor revealed a smile, which looked extremely strange. There was a hint of cruelty and terror in the strangeness, and his eyes were already extremely furious. Chapter 33:30. Ever since he had stepped into the Empyrean realm, his mentality had completely changed. He was a high and mighty, invincible great figure, while an Emperor King's level of life was a level lower than his. It was like an adult and a child. They simply could not be compared. However, he had been injured by a child with a sharp weapon. Wasn't this a great humiliation? If word got out, how could he establish himself among the heavenly masters in the future? Would he still have any dignity left? Moreover, what was more serious was that if this started a challenge from the Emperor Lords to the Heavenly Master Realm, he would undoubtedly be the first to bear the brunt. After all, was there anyone weaker than him among the Heavenly Master Realm experts? He had just achieved Tao, so he was naturally the easiest target. How could he not know what many Emperor Lords were thinking? If he was still in the Emperor Realm, he would naturally think from the perspective of an Emperor Realm Lord. But now that he was a Heavenly Venerate, he naturally wouldn't think from the perspective of an Emperor Realm Lord. He naturally wanted to maintain the dignity of a Heavenly Venerate, whether it was intentional or not. A Heavenly Master could die, but it had to be in the hands of a Heavenly Master. A Heavenly Master could be injured, but it had to be in the hands of a Heavenly Master. However, an Emperor Lord definitely could not be. At this time, Yishuin had already violated this bottom line. The killing intent in his heart was simply innumerable, like the grains of sand in the Ganges River. In fact, he couldn't even count them clearly. You probably don't really put me in your eyes, but I've been preparing for this day for a long time. How is it? How does this sword feel? Yishuin smiled faintly. His expression was one of contentment. How would he dare to do anything without some guts? He did not lack the courage to fight with his life on the line. But this did not mean that he would act recklessly. Since he dared to come and did not retreat, he naturally had some confidence. This was because he could not retreat, and the human race could not retreat either. Therefore, he could only do his best to find a way to injure or even kill the heaven-devouring demon emperor. Haha, how amazing! With such a scheming mind, it is no wonder that the human race could rise in your hands. The sky-devouring demon monarch stood up slowly as if he had never been injured. However, his body was covered in blood, and many wounds were so deep that his bones could be seen. More than half of his body had been hit by the sword will and had almost exploded. At this moment, he naturally looked eerie and terrifying. He did not have the supreme glory of a celestial master at all. This is nothing. Those who fight will always win. This is an unchanging truth since ancient times. Yishuin did not feel anything at all. You're right. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you emerge victorious in every battle. You've prepared so much for this battle, but I haven't prepared anything at all. It's not like I've suffered a loss for nothing. said the heaven-devouring demon monarch nonchalantly. However, the way he gritted his teeth revealed that he was not as calm as he appeared to be. He also knew that he wasn't completely unprepared. It was just that he felt that as long as he stepped into the celestial master realm, it would be more effective than any preparation. After stepping into the celestial master realm, he didn't take Yi Shiwen seriously. Compared to the many trump cards that Yi Shiwen had prepared, he had prepared very little. In fact, it could even be said that he had almost no trump cards at all. And he also agreed with Yi Shiwen's words. The one who made more calculations would win. This was an unchanging truth since ancient times. And he had actually suffered a loss. Yi Shiwen faintly smiled and said, "But you don't think that I have prepared for so long just to let you suffer a big loss, right?" The heaven-devouring demon monarch suddenly raised his head, and a terrifying light burst from his eyes. Then he burst into laughter until he could not stand up straight. "Ha ha ha ha! Good. What a great martial emperor, what an arrogant human martial emperor. However, if you think that the human race is only at this level just because I suffered a great loss from you, then I think you will pay the price." The heaven-devouring demon monarch's eyes grew colder and colder, as if there was an icy universe churning in his eyes. Yi Shiwen sneered and didn't say anything. That was because he knew very well that he had never underestimated the heaven-devouring demon king. However, the heaven-devouring demon king had still underestimated him. If he thought that Yi Shiwen was only at this level, then he would be gravely mistaken. There was still a surprise to come. He knew that it would be enough to seriously injure the heaven-devouring demon monarch with this attack alone. It would not be so easy to kill him. After all, it was impossible for the heaven-devouring demon monarch to stand still and not defend himself. Hence, it would be good if he could seriously injure him. The reason why he chose to attack when the heaven-devouring demon monarch launched his third attack was that the heaven-devouring demon monarch's first reaction would not be to dodge. Instead, he would directly pounce on him. If this sword missed, the consequences would be unimaginable. Although Yi Shiwen was unable to kill him, it was enough to prevent him from recovering in a short period of time. This was a battle with his back against the wall. There was no way out. He could only kill the heaven-devouring demon monarch. At this time, no one had thought that Yi Shiwen's real purpose was to kill him. He did not want to force him to retreat, but to kill him. The only pity was that after searching for so long, he could only find one sword intent that could be stored in the altar. The others were all Emperor Lord-level sword intents, which were of no use to the heaven-devouring demon monarch. Otherwise, he would really be able to finish this battle in one go. The heaven-devouring demon monarch no longer cared about the injuries on his body. He only used a portion of his power to suppress the sword intents on his wounds and prevent them from acting up. Then his aura burst out again, and his combat power also increased crazily. He was not afraid that Yi Shiwen would attack again. He was also very smart and could see many things clearly. Naturally, he knew that Yi Shiwen did not have the strength to continue. Otherwise, he would definitely be killed by another sword aura. Under such circumstances, he would not have been able to withstand a second sword attack. He believed that Yi Shiwen could also see this, but he did not do so. In that case, the reason was obvious. The heaven-devouring demon monarch was certain that he did not have such a trump card. In that case, Yi Shiwen had nothing to be afraid of. He wanted to let Yi Shiwen know how terrifying the anger of a celestial lord could be, even if it was a celestial lord who had been severely injured. Boom! The heaven-devouring demon monarch made his move. In an instant, heaven and earth seemed to have been included in his domain. That terrifying pressure was released, almost destroying everything. Time and space all disappeared into nothingness, directly turning into chaos. A terrifying aura flowed, and the laws could destroy the world. This was the terrifying power of Celestial Lord when he truly erupted. He directly pounced on Yi Shiwen, wanted to finish him off in close combat. This was also what he was best at. He swooped down towards Yi Shiwen like an unparalleled ferocious beast. After Yi Shiwen tilted his body slightly, he simply struck out with his palm. In an instant, the endless chaos that seemed to have been destroyed was grasped in his hand and released. Universe Creation Palm. Boom! Yi Shiwen's palm collided fiercely with the heaven-devouring demon monarch's attack. In the face of an all-out attack by Celestial Lord, Yi Shiwen did not fall into a disadvantageous position. In fact, he even had the upper hand. This was because the heaven-devouring demon monarch had not expected that Yi Shiwen would actually have such a technique, as well as a technique that could increase his strength. He hurriedly released another move to blast away the Universe Creation Palm. A slight smile flashed across Yi Shiwen's lips. It was no different from what he had expected. Although the heaven-devouring demon monarch's strength was unparalleled and was like a celestial being in the eyes of many emperors, in reality, the heaven-devouring demon monarch had yet to consolidate his cultivation. He had yet to recover from the injuries he had suffered during the heavenly tribulation, and he was struck by the sword intent. This series of unforeseen events had finally caused his combat power to fall from the Celestial Lord level. Although it had only temporarily reverted to the peak level of an Emperor Lord, it was even stronger than that level. However, to Yi Shiwen, this was enough. It was enough for him to have a chance to kill the heaven-devouring demon monarch. There was not much time left. Before the heaven-devouring demon monarch completely expelled the sword intent in his body, this was his best and only time. This was also his only chance, so he would definitely not let it go. There's not much time left, so you shall die too. Yi Shiwen took a step forward, and in the next moment his figure had already appeared in front of the heaven-devouring demon monarch. He was almost instantly in front of him. At this moment, he opened his eyes and entered the state of the eye of heavenly punishment. Suddenly, his entire body underwent a wonderful evolution and transformation. It was as if the power of heaven and earth was within his reach, and his entire body had become a part of heaven and earth. Then, he slashed out another palm. Each palm strike of the Universe Creation Palm consumed a large amount of spiritual energy. However, in order to kill the heaven-devouring demon monarch, Yi Shiwen had no other choice, nor did he need to have any other choice. Bang! The heaven-devouring demon monarch was directly hit. Although his reaction was also very fast, Yi Shiwen's speed was even faster. The demon wings on his back were fully extended, bursting out at a speed that surpassed time and space. He was sent flying and coughed up a mouthful of blood. His body was sent flying like a meteor. He was no longer at his peak, so it was impossible for him to be compared to when he was at his peak. Thus, he suffered a great loss from this attack. In the end, it still affected the injuries within his body. His old and new injuries were all affected. Strand after strand of Empyrean blood splashed into the starry sky of the universe. It was a horrifying sight. The roar of the heaven-devouring demon monarch spread throughout the entire galaxy. He was furious and roaring. He was unconvinced and indignant. If he was still at his peak, it would have been easy for him to deal with Yi Shiwen. Even if he was powerful, even if he had the Universe Creation Palm, Yi Shiwen was not worthy to be his opponent. It was impossible for him to be his opponent. But now he was forced to retreat again and was injured. He was completely enraged. Chapter 33-31. He had suffered a huge loss at Yi Shiwen's hands and was forced to retreat again and again. This time, Yi Shiwen did not intend to give him a chance to recover, because Yi Shiwen's goal was to kill the heaven-devouring demon monarch. What was everyone looking at? They could only see the heaven-devouring demon monarch roaring while being beaten like a wounded beast. It had completely subverted their worldview. In their opinion, the heaven-devouring demon monarch should be an invincible and powerful existence, but now he was being beaten by Yi Shiwen. It had completely subverted their worldview. Their outlook on life was about to collapse. Although they were also vaguely looking forward to it, they still felt horrified when Yi Shiwen actually did it in an almost miraculous way. It was because they seemed to have seen the birth of an uncontrollable monster. What was a monster? A monster was an existence that far exceeded their understanding and control. Whether it was good or bad, it was a monster. They possessed strength, and lifespan that far exceeded ordinary people. However, they understood that this was a normal situation. Yishuan's situation of leapfrogging to challenge someone of a higher level, no matter how many reasons he had. In their opinion, he belonged to the monster level. Yishuan's attacks fell like a storm, and every blow could seriously injure the heaven-devouring demon monarch. Usually, it was impossible to hurt the heaven-devouring demon monarch, especially for those experienced heavenly venerables. They could even modify the rules and make their attacks extremely slow or even have no attack power at all. Only heavenly venerables who also had the ability to modify the rules could deal with it. However, it was obvious that the heaven-devouring demon monarch had not mastered this ability well, and he was seriously injured. This was the fundamental reason why Yishuan was able to succeed in a row. It could be said that he was beaten silly all of a sudden. Every time the heaven-devouring demon monarch was about to explode and beat Yishuan back to gain a chance to breathe, Yishuan would actually use an enlarged version of the universe creation palm, directly knocking him out again. He completely suppressed it and completely controlled the rhythm of the battle. It was like he was scheming against the unsuspecting. He did not know how long he had prepared for this battle, but it was all under his control. At the same time, he was extremely shocked. A celestial venerable was indeed a celestial venerable. With so many universe creation palms of his, if it were an ordinary sovereign lord, even an expert who stood at the pinnacle of the sovereign lord realm like Electro Lord would not be able to withstand 2 or 3 of these palms before being completely reduced to nothingness. However, the heaven-devouring demon emperor hadn't been slapped to death. One could well imagine how terrifying he was. He was even more terrifying than Yishuan had initially estimated. He was very glad that he had not underestimated the heaven-devouring demon monarch back then. Otherwise, he would have been the one in a passive position. At this moment, Yishuan did not seem like he was engaged in a life-and-death battle. Instead, he seemed like he was practicing martial arts. Of the 3,000 martial arts, Yishuan could not even count how many martial arts he had. This was because every martial art could evolve into many martial arts. At this moment, all of them were completely evolved. The vitality of the heaven-devouring demon king before him was much greater than he had imagined. Therefore, he did not have to worry about being killed and could use his full strength. This series of battles had left the heaven-devouring demon monarch in a daze. The crowd was no exception. Soon, the crowd reacted, including the martial emperors and emperors of the heaven-devouring demon tribe. At this moment, they had gone completely crazy. Seeing their leader, who was also the greatest hope of their tribe, being beaten to such a state by Yishuan, how could they endure it? They did not care if they were a match for Yishuan or not. On the spot, they also took a big stride forward and rushed into the starry sky of the universe. They felt that their speed could not be faster. Previously, they had thought that the heaven-devouring demon monarch could kill Yishuan with a flip of his hand. It would not be difficult at all. Therefore, they did not have any intention of helping him. However, now they realized that they were wrong. If they had gone forward earlier, they might have been able to help. Although they felt that they were very far away, with their speed, they had already reached Yishuan in an instant. The remaining 5 martial emperors of the heaven-devouring demon tribe formed a large formation and surrounded Yishuan instantly. "Get lost! You are courting death!" Yishuan roared. Although these martial emperors and martial emperors of the heaven-devouring demon tribe were not a threat to him, they were more than enough to buy him some time. In fact, they had managed to do that. In an instant, he was separated from the heaven-devouring demon monarch. Not good. Yishuan immediately sensed that the heaven-devouring demon monarch had broken free from his control. He could clearly sense that the heaven-devouring demon monarch would also die in his hands after a period of time. At this moment, the obstruction of these few martial emperors had bought the heaven-devouring demon monarch crucial time. "You are courting death." Yishuan's arm seemed to have turned into a sharp sword as it slashed down fiercely. It directly cut a martial emperor of the heaven-devouring demon tribe in half, killing him instantly. At this moment, the other martial emperors of the heaven-devouring demon tribe were not afraid at all. Instead, they rushed forward one after another. Pucci! 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 After a few consecutive slashes, those martial emperors were cut in half on the spot. They were unable to stop Yishuin at all. They were also the only martial emperors of the heaven-devouring demon tribe left. Previously, they had followed the heaven-devouring demon monarch into the divine capital of fortune to protect him. That was why they were not in the heaven-devouring demon tribe and managed to escape the calamity in the end. However, it was all in vain. Everything was like reincarnation. They had managed to escape from Yishuin's hands back then, yet they were still killed by him. All the experts of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan wept upon seeing that scene. With the exception of the heaven-devouring monstrous emperor, all the other monarchs of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan had been killed. They were all the pillars of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan. With all of them dead, the consequences would naturally be unimaginable. If the heaven-devouring monstrous emperor was still alive, it would be fine, as he would be able to intimidate the experts of the other clans. However, if even the heaven-devouring monstrous emperor was killed, the consequences would be unimaginable. After all, how many people had the heaven-devouring demon tribe offended in the past? It was simply uncountable, especially the surrounding tribes. Practically all of them had conflicts with the heaven-devouring demon tribe. The special cultivation method of the heaven-devouring demon tribe naturally caused them to have conflicts with others. Because of that, there were a lot of people who hated the heaven-devouring demon tribe to the core. Even among the people who had come to congratulate the heaven-devouring demon emperor for reaching the heavenly venerable realm, there were many people who wished for the heaven-devouring demon tribe to die. However, they were afraid of the might of the heaven-devouring demon tribe and did not dare to voice their anger. They were not fools. It wasn't that they didn't know about it. Rather, they thought that the glory of the heaven-devouring demon tribe would continue for eternity and that there would never be a day where it would stop. However, a single misstep had resulted in a series of missteps. Before they had ambushed the human race, they had never imagined that there would be such a consequence. In their opinion, there was no problem at all. Although the human race had risen, they were nothing in the eyes of the veteran experts. They believed that the human race was merely a rising star. If the human race dared to be arrogant, they would kill them with a single slap. Other than the 10 great clans and those super sects, who else had they been afraid of? However, they had never imagined that the human race would be so difficult to provoke. Ever since they had started fighting the human race, all of their emperors had been killed. The heaven-devouring demon emperor had also been seriously injured. There was not a single piece of flesh on his body that was unharmed. Blood was flowing everywhere, and bone fragments were flying about. That sort of scene could not be faked. The price they had to pay was simply too great. Ever since their heaven-devouring demon tribe had risen to power, they'd spent a lot of time and resources in order to nurture so many emperors. To die here just like that, this sort of loss was simply too great. Merely, they had never thought that it was their fault. That was the nature of their race. All they did was look at Yishuin in the sky with eyes filled with hatred. They wanted nothing more than to dismember him into 10,000 pieces. A war of extermination. At that moment, they finally realized that this might develop into a war of extermination. They had never had such a thought before. However, it was different for the human race. Ever since they had provoked such a powerful enemy, they had been constantly worried that it might develop into a war of extermination. Unfortunately, they had no choice but to fight with their backs against the wall. In terms of preparation for war, the difference between the human race and the heaven-devouring demon tribe, as well as between Yishuin and the heaven-devouring demon emperor, was simply too great. I'll kill you. I'll definitely kill you. The heaven-devouring demon king's voice was deep and hoarse. He was extremely furious. He was about to go crazy. Although he had been saved, the last sovereign emperor of the heaven-devouring demon race had also died in Yishuin's hands. It wasn't just a great loss of vitality. He didn't have any vitality left. Could he still show up for everything? As for being on par with the top 10 powerhouses, that was even more ridiculous. It was simply impossible for him to do so in a short period of time. Even if he won and razed the human race to the ground and killed them all, it would still be the same. Yishuan quickly calmed himself down. Since he had managed to escape, there was no point in being angry. Moreover, his confidence had soared to an unprecedented level. It was absolutely impossible for the heaven-devouring demon emperor, who had been severely injured by him, to escape from his hands. He knew that it was time for the real battle. Life and death depended on this moment. How much strength can you still use now? Yishuan said faintly. The combination of new and old injuries was enough to make him suffer. It was impossible for him to use all his strength. Otherwise, he would die. There was no other possibility for Yishuan to die if he used all the injuries on his body. But if he didn't use all the martial power in his body, he wouldn't be Yishuan's opponent. Now, he was in a dilemma, so he was confident that the victory was in his hands. Chapter 33-32. Right now, the heaven-devouring demon monarch was in a dilemma. There was no other reason than the sword intent that Yishuan had meticulously prepared. It was the root cause of the situation. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have fallen into such a situation. The heaven-devouring demon sovereign looked at Yishuan. He naturally knew that he would be killed by Yishuan if he did not release his combat power in this situation. However, if he were to release his combat power, the terrifying injuries in his body would also kill him. When he was crossing the tribulation, he had not recovered from his injuries. Initially, it was not a big deal. However, Yishuan's next sword attack had completely worsened his injuries. Coupled with the series of critical strikes, just now, the injuries in his body had directly turned into a mass of paste. He was like a bomb that could blow him up at any time. All of this was planned by the man in front of him. If he had not experienced it personally today, he would not have believed that an emperor could challenge a heavenly master one day. You can't run away today, Yishuan said faintly. What benefits do you get from doing this? I'm afraid that from now on, your existence will make some people restless. The sky-devouring demon emperor said faintly. Yishuan knew what he was talking about. A heavenly master could not be challenged. Even if one died, it could only be done by a heavenly master expert. However, Yishuan had broken this legend. It would be strange if the heavenly masters on the high altars would have a good impression of Yishuan. Each of those heavenly masters was stronger than the sky-devouring demon emperor. The consequences of being targeted by these people were simply unimaginable. He just sneered and did not take these words to heart. It was not that he did not understand these things. If he were in Yishuan's shoes, he would not have a good impression of a quasi-emperor who could challenge an emperor. However, he had no other choice. Everything was forced, and he had no other choice. Since that was the case, it was not his character to worry about everything. You don't have to stall for time, because it's useless. I won't give you time. Yishuan did not have to think to know that the sky-devouring demon emperor was trying to stall for time. Ordinary injuries could be completely healed in the time it took to speak, but this injury was not so simple. It's enough. Although it's not enough to completely recover, it's enough for me to take a breath and kill you. The eyes of the heaven-devouring demon emperor became incomparably terrifying. They were like the eyes of a terrifying beast as he looked at his prey. 5 moves. You will definitely die within 5 moves. 5 moves? Yishuan naturally understood that the heaven-devouring demon sovereign was planning to fight to the death. He would die within 5 moves. Otherwise, the heaven-devouring demon sovereign would die. In the end, the heaven-devouring demon monarch only managed to buy himself 5 moves. However, it was more than enough for a top-notch expert. Boom! As he spoke, the heaven-devouring monster monarch instantly made his move. He had been unparalleled throughout his entire life and had never placed those powerful experts in his eyes. He had lived for far too long, even dating back to the era of the sway sovereign of the human race. He had never been one to admit defeat. It was just that he was stunned by Yishuan earlier. Now, he wanted to seize the initiative and kill Yishuan. The blood essence in his body was burning. With the ability of a heavenly venerable, the terrifying power that erupted after burning any drop of blood essence was enough to make him invincible. Just a simple punch contained unparalleled terrifying power. He did not use the gold-plated phoenix wing pendant because it had already been smashed to pieces just now. If he took it out again, it would probably disintegrate in front of everyone. The loss of his life Dao weapon was also an important reason why he was unable to fight back. However, on the other hand, if he did not have the gold-plated phoenix wing pendant to protect him, he would probably have been killed on the spot just now. Everything was predetermined by the heavens. It was really hard to say. Bang! Yishuan was not to be outdone either. He also displayed the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. He blasted out a punch and collided with the heaven-devouring demon monarch fiercely. This was an earth-shattering battle. Just this collision alone destroyed a large area of the Sea of Stars and directly turned the entire battlefield into nothingness. Clanging sounds and the sounds of collisions were endless. This was a shocking collision. The entire world was wailing with the intense demon monarch. Thump, thump, thump. Yishuan took a few steps back. At this critical moment, the heaven-devouring demon monarch temporarily recovered to the battle of the heavenly venerable level by burning his life essence. He was not at his peak, but he was not far from it. This was also the only chance for him to turn the situation around and kill Yishuan. Yishuan was also fighting with his life. He knew that there were only 5 more moves left. If he could survive these 5 moves, he would naturally be in a better position. If he could not, he would die. He only felt an extremely depressed feeling in his chest. It was as if he was about to spit out a mouthful of blood in the next moment. However, he forcefully endured it. This mouthful of blood would cost him 100,000 years of cultivation. On the other side, the heaven-devouring demon monarch was continuously retreating. The powerful counterforce also made his heart bleed. However, he could not withstand it and spat out a mouthful of blood. He immediately felt much better. Although this mouthful of blood had cost him tens of thousands of years of cultivation, it also gave him the upper hand. He once again pounced towards Yishuan. Just a kick tore through the night sky like lightning and ruthlessly slammed towards Yishuan. He did not know how many experts he had met in his life and how many dangerous situations he had encountered. However, it seemed like there had never been a situation as dangerous as this one that could really kill him. Bang! Although this kick was fast, it ultimately landed on the demon's wings. The demon's wings behind, Yishuan immediately spread out and protected him. However, although this kick of the heaven-devouring demon monarch seemed simple, it contained the power to destroy the universe. With just a simple kick, the demon's wings in front of Yishuan were smashed into pieces. The difference in strength between the two was too great. 3 moves? You will die in 3 moves. If you have any last words, say them now. Yishuan shouted loudly. He was interfering with the mind of the heaven-devouring demon monarch to buy time for himself. When experts exchanged blows, it was just a matter of a second. Perhaps this was all that he needed. The remaining 3 moves will take your life. When the heaven-devouring demon monarch heard Yishuan's words, he immediately roared. He also knew that he did not have much time left. Then he saw the laws on his body burning fiercely. The huge power obtained from the burning laws was instilled into his body. Then he suddenly blasted towards Yishuan. Whoosh! This attack swept across most of the void. In an instant, Yishuan seemed to only be able to see this light in this void. It was the starting point of the universe's explosion. It was the singularity in the entire black hole. It was the origin of everything. It completely swept over. Yishuan knew that this was the final moment. How could he not be careful? He also roared. First, a seal word flew out from his body. Then, this seal word was like an inescapable net, suppressing in the direction of the heaven-devouring demon monarch. It was going to seal him. However, this seal word only lasted for a moment before it was completely broken. It could not pose a greater threat to the heaven-devouring demon monarch's attack at all. Time, domain, hold it for me. Dissolve it. Yishuan shouted loudly. At the same time, the time domain in his body spread out. In an instant, all time seemed to have slowed down. It advanced inch by inch, but at the same time, the light formed by this power weakened by a bit with every inch it advanced. The fast and slow time took effect at the same time, completely affecting and delaying the advancement of this power. Forcibly opening the time domain like this and using the time domain would naturally consume a lot of resources. Every second consumed a lot of resources. Even Yi Shiwen, who had always been extravagant and did not care about wealth, could not help but feel extremely distressed. However, there was no other way at this time. Finally, when this attack blasted in front of Yi Shiwen, it no longer had much power. Under a breeze, it turned into nothingness. No matter how powerful a power was, it would also turn into nothingness under the corrosion of time. Take this punch of mine again. At this moment, the heaven-devouring demon monarch blasted another punch in front of Yi Shiwen's face. Yi Shiwen only had enough time to form a cross with his hands to block this punch. His body flew out like a cannonball. He didn't know how many stars had collapsed along the way. Looking from afar, it seemed as if the stars above the starry sky had dimmed. They had all been extinguished. The heaven-devouring demon monarch, who was going all out, was extremely terrifying. If Yi Shiwen had not schemed against him, he would not be a match for the heaven-devouring demon monarch, even if he could kill other emperors casually. The legend of the heavenly lord was not bragging. Instead, he indeed possessed such terrifying strength. Even though he had been schemed against by Yi Shiwen to this extent, he still possessed such terrifying combat power. Puffed. Yi Shiwen spat out a mouthful of blood despite being drunk. However, his spirit was suddenly lifted. The final blow would decide the outcome of the battle. He was going to slaughter the heavenly lord. At that time, the entire world would probably be shocked. However, he did not think too much at this time. The heaven-devouring demon monarch, who had already bet all of his bets on these last 5 moves, was almost burning all over his body. All of his skills were unleashed at this moment. He was like a dazzling sun, and his light illuminated the entire universe. A hint of brilliance flashed in Yi Shiwen's eyes. Then, a sword appeared in his hand out of nowhere. It was also a Dao weapon. Yi Shiwen had killed too many experts, and many of them used swords. All of them were in his hands. Then, dozens of Dao weapons appeared in Yi Shiwen's hands. Then, all of them flew out at once and directly flew in front of the heaven-devouring demon monarch. Explode. Following Yi Shiwen's loud shout, the endless explosions instantly engulfed everything. The heaven-devouring demon emperor in front of him was also completely engulfed. The collective explosion of dozens of Dao tools was a terrifying thing. All of them exploded at once, and the entire galaxy was blown up. He's finally dead. Yi Shiwen finally could not feel the life aura of the heaven-devouring demon monarch anymore. Chapter 33:33. This time, Yi Shiwen was certain that the heaven-devouring demon emperor was indeed dead. There was not a trace of life force left in him. How terrifying was the collective explosion of dozens of Dao tools. However, Yi Shiwen was still sure that he hadn't been killed by the collective explosion of dozens of Dao tools. Instead, he had been injured by the aftermath of the explosion. He hadn't been able to suppress his internal injuries, and had been killed by them. Yi Shiwen would never have thought of using dozens of Dao weapons to kill the heaven-devouring demon emperor. It was like a quasi-emperor trying to kill an emperor lord with dozens of pseudo-Dao weapons. That was simply impossible. They were not on the same level at all. Therefore, Yi Shiwen had been holding on to this trump card, which was not considered a trump card, and did not rush to use it. Instead, he waited until now to finally use it. It was because he saw that the heaven-devouring demon emperor was indeed an arrow at the end of its flight that he detonated it all at once. It also affected the internal injuries of the heaven-devouring demon emperor, causing it to erupt all at once. The other emperor lords were also completely dumbfounded. Did he succeed just like that? They were completely dumbfounded. Even if there was a 1 in a million chance that Yi Shiwen could successfully kill the heaven-devouring demon emperor, they thought that it would be a lose-lose situation. However, from the looks of it now, Yi Shiwen had killed the heaven-devouring demon emperor in a one-sided manner. Yi Shiwen was indeed injured during this process. However, Compared to the tragic state of the heaven-devouring demon emperor, it was simply incomparable. Therefore, the idea of looting a burning house was instantly dispelled. What a joke. Looking at Yi Shiwen's appearance, it would be a piece of cake for him to slaughter dozens of emperor lords. In fact, just as they had guessed, Yi Shiwen had already recovered to his peak state after a few breaths. This was the recovery power of an emperor lord. It was just that domineering. As long as he was not seriously injured or was prevented from recovering by other forces like the heaven-devouring demon emperor, he would basically be able to recover to his peak state in a few breaths, and his combat power would be off the charts. If someone wanted to attack him at this time, they would be courting death. In front of him, the physical body of the heaven-devouring demon emperor gradually reassembled. Although he was killed by the explosion, in fact, his spirit was destroyed. As long as there was a little bit of his physical body, it could naturally be reassembled. However, compared to his peak state, it was not at the same level at all. For Yi Shiwen, this was enough. With the physical body of the heaven-devouring demon emperor, he could observe the laws of a heavenly venerate at a close distance and prepare for his final breakthrough to the heavenly venerate realm. The more prepared he was now, the easier it would be for him to enter the heavenly venerate realm in the end. This was because he knew that it would not be easy for him to enter the heavenly venerate realm at this time. There should be many people waiting to plot against him. Even the heaven-devouring demon monarch, who had a powerful tribe behind him, had to hide in the divine capital of creation. This was because attacking halfway was the most effective. Some of them even aimed at the weakened heavenly venerables who had just passed their heavenly tribulation. The heaven-devouring demon emperor should have been attacked like this. Otherwise, how could a heavenly venerate, who was far more powerful than an emperor lord, have not recovered from his internal injuries? This was also the reason why he had not attracted the heavenly venerate tribulation. He had already sensed the invisible pressure, which was faintly discernible, as if it could appear at any time to beat him to a pulp. After killing the heaven-devouring demon emperor, Yi Shiwen immediately sent a signal to the human sovereign. Now, not only the heaven-devouring demon emperor, but also the other emperor lords and emperor lords of the heaven-devouring demon tribe had been killed by him. This was the weakest time for the heaven-devouring demon tribe. Now that he was guarding here, even if the other emperor lords had ulterior motives, they would not dare to take action. At this time, he was no different from a madman in the eyes of everyone. He repeatedly challenged the strong with the weak. Previously, the human clan had just annexed 4 prefectures and dared to fight against the heaven-devouring demon tribe, which had 7 prefectures. Based on the strength of the human clan at that time, they did not even have a fifth of the strength of the heaven-devouring demon tribe. Including the heaven-devouring demon emperor, they might not even have a tenth of the strength of the heaven-devouring demon tribe. However, he attacked and killed without hesitation. Later, when the heaven-devouring demon emperor entered the heavenly venerate realm, everyone thought that even if he did not flee for his life, he would at least find a place to hide. Who knew that he would come to challenge the heaven-devouring demon emperor with the determination to fight to his death? In the end, he actually succeeded. Although he repeatedly defeated the strong, his domineering style had been thoroughly understood by everyone. Not only the heaven-devouring demon emperor, but all the emperor lords of the heaven-devouring demon tribe had been wiped out. There was nothing he did not dare to do. He even dared to kill a heavenly venerate and was not afraid of the wrath of the divine capital of creation. Such a person could not be offended. It was precisely because of this that Yi Shiwen was able to suppress the situation. At this moment, his fierce reputation played an important role. After the human emperor received Yi Shiwen's words, he immediately released the iron hooves of the human clan that he had been hiding for a long time. Teleportation formations opened one after another and appeared at the border of the 2 prefectures. The iron hooves of the human clan and the great army of the human clan flew out from the teleportation formations in an unending stream. Towering giant war beasts and powerful war fortresses appeared one after another. Millions and tens of millions of soldiers were dispatched. In practically an instant, the heaven-devouring demon tribe was caught unprepared. Due to the previous invasion of the human clan, the heaven-devouring demon tribe had deployed a large amount of troops in the direction of the human clan. However, it was completely useless. This time around, it was a battle that would determine the future of the human clan, or perhaps the foundation of the human clan. Thus, the human clan did not dare to underestimate the human clan in the slightest. With a single slap of his palm, the human clan directly shattered the defensive line of the heaven-devouring demon tribe. After a monarch-level expert of that caliber took action, the defensive line of the heaven-devouring demon tribe appeared extremely laughable. It was completely useless. Moreover, apart from the human emperor, the Fengi clan also had other affiliated monarchs of the human clan accompanying the human clan in this attack. At the same time, the Shur clan, the Dark clan, the various clans of the Thunder Marshland, and many others were also attacking. They could all be considered as vassals of the human clan. This battle concerned the future of the human clan. Thus, how could they not contribute their strength? As such, there were many allied forces of the various clans within the human clan's army. The monarchs of the various clans also obeyed the orders of the human emperor and were prepared to take action at any time. No one knew what they were thinking. If Yishuan had lost, no one knew whether they would betray the human clan at the last moment. However, since Yishuan had emerged victorious, all their previous guesses had become baseless. Now that Yishuan had killed the heaven-devouring demon emperor, it was foreseeable that the future of the human clan would be limitless. Similarly, Yishuan's future would also be limitless. Following such a super expert would definitely bring them a lot of benefits in the future. At this moment, they were naturally eager to give it a try. After the human emperor took action, the other monarchs also took action at the same time. With these monarchs taking the vanguard, the army of the heaven-devouring demon emperor could not stop them at all. No matter how sturdy their defensive line was, it was only against quasi-emperors. For the monarchs, it was not worth mentioning at all. However, in the face of the sudden invasion of the human clan, the monarchs of the heaven-devouring demon emperor, whom they had high hopes for, did not appear. They did not appear to save them from defeat. Instead, the human clan was pushed back by 1,000 miles. Very soon, a rumor spread. It was that the monarchs of the heaven-devouring demon emperor had been slaughtered. Initially, they did not believe this news. What a joke. Not only did the heaven-devouring demon emperor have those monarchs, but they also had incomparably powerful heavenly venerables. Who would dare to cause trouble for them? Therefore, in the beginning, they only thought that the human clan was courting death. However, they soon realized that something was wrong. If it was fake, the monarchs should have already appeared by now. After all, no matter how slow they were to react, they should have reacted by the time they were defeated. However, not a single one of them appeared. Then, an even more terrifying news spread. It was not only the many monarchs, but even the heaven-devouring demon emperor, whom they regarded as the pillar of support, had completely fallen. This news was like a bolt from the blue. Although this news was said to be a rumor, no one came out to refute it. Although the quasi-emperors kept emphasizing that this was absolutely impossible, because it had already subverted their worldview, there was still no support from the rear. Be it the monarchs or the heavenly venerables, not a single one of them came to support them. Even if they did not want to believe it, there was nothing they could do. Everything seemed to have become a foregone conclusion, because not a single monarch could come out to say that this was not the truth. Moreover, there were many smart people in the heaven-devouring demon tribe, and not all of them were idiots. There were many things that were not hard to guess, especially when the human clan suddenly attacked, as if they did not care about their lives. Moreover, there were many monarchs who took the initiative to attack. It was obvious that the human clan was trying to kill them completely. This did not seem like a defeat. Instead, it seemed like they were defeated. Therefore, it was time to wipe out the remaining enemies. However, regardless of what they were thinking, whether they were willing to believe it or not, it could not be changed. The iron hooves of the human clan charged straight in, and their army was defeated. Their land had already been occupied by the human clan army that rushed over. There were flames of war and massacres everywhere. Countless heaven-devouring demon tribe members were crying bitterly. They had experienced it once, and now they were going to experience it all over again. However, this time was different from the last time. Last time, the human race had a chance to retreat. But this time, the human race didn't have a chance to retreat at all. This was a war of extermination. Nothing could break their hearts more than this. However, if it were them, they would have done it even more ruthlessly. They would have probably eaten up the entire human clan and turned them all into their own food. It would have been 100 times or even 1,000 times more terrifying than what the human clan was doing now. The cavalry of the human clan did not show any mercy. Previously, when the heaven-devouring demon tribe invaded, there were countless casualties and countless of their clansmen were turned into food. They even asked for 100 billion of their clansmen to be used as food. All of this was still fresh in their minds. There was no sympathy for the two races in this bloody war. Chapter 33-34. At that moment, they naturally wanted to kill all of the heaven-devouring monstrous clansmen as quickly as possible. Although it was impossible to kill all of the heaven-devouring monstrous clansmen, it would be best to kill as many as possible. Although the grudges between the two clans were not very long, they were deeply engraved in their bones. Everyone knew that once the other party gained the upper hand, they would definitely not let them get away. Naturally, they would not have any misgivings when fighting. However, the experts of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan were much more depressed. The reason for that was because the experts among them would always attract the attention of the peak experts of the human race. Due to the fact that they did not have the assistance of a sovereign emperor, their quasi-emperors were the ones to suffer. Before the many sovereign emperors of the human race, they were unable to hide at all. They would be crushed to death the moment they appeared. Regardless of whether they were strong or weak, from early-stage quasi-emperors to peak quasi-emperors, they would all be crushed to death without any ability to resist. This was how powerless quasi-emperors were before sovereign emperors. As for the quasi-emperors of the human army, they would target the divine kings of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan and crush them. In this manner, layer by layer, the divine kings of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan were crushed. As a result, every single expert of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan was facing experts of the human army that were an entire realm above them. Thus, regardless of how much they struggled, it was all useless. When faced with experts of the human army that were an entire realm above them, or sometimes even 2 entire realms above them, they were unable to even put up the slightest bit of resistance. The heaven-devouring monstrous clan possessed a foundation above that of the human race. However, their experts were scattered across 7 provinces. Furthermore, they were ambushed by the human race. Thus, they were simply not prepared for a decisive battle. Thus, they were simply unable to gather together. Thus, regardless of when or where they were unable to gather their superior military strength. They could only be crushed by the human army's superior military strength. In addition to the all-out suppression of their experts, not to mention blocking the human army, they were unable to even cause too much damage to the human army. Faced with those tough fortresses, the human army would first bombard them with the cannons of the war fortresses. After plowing the ground, the human cavalry would unleash a rain of arrows. Finally, they would step forward to reap the harvest. Those who were able to withstand the first 2 group attacks were as rare as phoenix feathers and Chelan horns. After that, they were drowned in the human army. The speed of the human race's advance was extremely fast because they knew that they were here to seize territories. They were in a hurry. If they didn't seize the time to occupy the territories of 7 prefectures, it was very likely that they would become someone else's territory. Even if they lost a prefecture's territory, it would be incomparably painful. One must know that the total territory of the human race in the past was only half a prefecture's territory. Therefore, they knew how important these territories were to the development of the human race. Right now, Yishiwen was still at the front. However, those emperors would slowly come to their senses. Perhaps they would form an allied army and attack. Not to mention, there would also be the intervention of the Eastern Empyrean Mansion. It would be best if they could take down the 7 prefectures in one go and make it a fait accompli. Then, even if others wanted to say anything, it would be impossible. Previously, when the heaven-devouring monstrous clan wanted to annex the 4 prefectures of the human race, they had done the same thing. An accomplished fact was the best protection. No one would make things difficult for the victors of a clan that was destined to decline for the sake of a clan that was destined to decline. As long as the Eastern Empyrean Mansion didn't say anything, who would dare to challenge a heavenly venerate? Right now, although Yishuan wasn't a heavenly venerate, he had slaughtered a heavenly venerate. Such a powerful freak definitely couldn't be provoked. To a certain extent, the current Yishuan was no different from a heavenly venerate. It was naturally different for a heavenly venerate. However, it was the same for many emperors. After all, no matter what, they weren't a match for him. Right now, what the human race needed to do was to take over the 7 prefectures before the Eastern Empyrean Mansion could react. When that happened, Yishuan would naturally negotiate with the Eastern Empyrean Mansion. Moreover, Yishuan had previously agreed with the Battle Emperor that he would be considered to have joined the Eastern Empyrean Mansion's camp. In regards to this, the Eastern Empyrean Mansion would probably turn a blind eye and not do anything. In any case, it wasn't worth it to compete with the human race for the sake of a heaven-devouring monstrous clan. The saying, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter, wasn't just applicable to the human race. Conversely, if the human race was wiped out, the outcome would be the same. This was normal. In the Fortune God dynasty, clans were wiped out every day, and new clans were born every day. The replacement of clans was the natural order of things. However, the 2 clans involved in this war could be considered as super clans in the entire eastern region. That was why the repercussions were so great. Otherwise, even if a small clan was wiped out, no one would really care. In order to seize time, after taking over the heaven-devouring monstrous clan and the human race, apart from those who stayed behind, the Battle Emperor immediately split into 6 groups and killed their way to the other 6 prefectures. This way, they could save as much time as possible. In order to occupy the 7 prefectures as quickly as possible, Yishuan didn't stay idle either. He knew that this was a crucial time, so he immediately sent out 3,000 clones and killed his way into the heaven-devouring monstrous clan's ancestral land. This was the essence of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan, and also the place with the most experts. Usually, there would be sovereign emperors standing guard there to prevent anyone from destroying it. However, right now, the heaven-devouring monstrous clan's sovereign emperors and heavenly venerables had all been wiped out by Yishuan. The remaining people couldn't pose any threat to Yishuan at all. Just 3,000 clones were enough to wipe out the entire ancestral land of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan. Those veteran quasi-emperors who had been cultivating in seclusion for many years and were waiting to break through to the sovereign emperor realm were also targets for slaughter. It could even be said that there weren't any ordinary heaven-devouring monstrous clansmen in the ancestral land of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan. Only the top-notch experts could survive here. Therefore, Yishuan didn't feel any psychological burden when he slaughtered. He was decisive in killing, but he wasn't a bloodthirsty person either. He didn't care about slaughtering civilians. Meanwhile, Yishuan's main body was hovering in the sky above the 7 prefectures. His divine sense enveloped everything. He was also warning the many sovereign emperors who wanted to take advantage of the situation. Even if they wanted to take advantage of the situation, they had to reconsider whether they had the ability to do so. Even heavenly venerables weren't a match for him, let alone ordinary sovereign emperors. By the time the human race had completely conquered the 7 prefectures and suppressed the rebellion army, a year had already passed. 1 year's time could be said to be long, but at the same time, it could not be said to be long. In the long history of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, 1 year was nothing more than a small wave that flashed across the river of history. It only took slightly more than a month for the human race to occupy the 7 prefectures. However, it was a hasty occupation. The various heaven-devouring monstrous clansmen resisted one after another. This required a lot of energy. This was because the many sovereign emperors, including Yi Shiwen, couldn't possibly put their energy into such a matter. Therefore, they could only send the various quasi-emperors to lead their experts to kill them. This took a long time. The heaven-devouring monstrous clan's foundation was too strong. Over the years, it was unknown how many experts they had secretly accumulated. It was unrealistic to annihilate them in one go. Over the past year or so, they had quelled rebellions and killed people everywhere. It could only be said that the heaven-devouring monstrous clan didn't dare to gather in the mountains or openly oppose the human race. This could only be considered as a preliminary peace. As for long-term peace, it would require years and years of painstaking effort. It wasn't something that could be achieved in a short period of time. However, this was enough for the human race. After eliminating the majority of the upper echelons of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan, the rest was simple. The reason for that was because the heaven-devouring monstrous clan's cultivation was too simple. They weren't like the human race, which had various cultivation techniques. Moreover, the majority of their cultivation techniques were related to devouring blood and flesh. Back when they occupied the 7 prefectures, this cultivation technique was naturally successful. As long as they had sufficient blood and flesh, their cultivation would increase rapidly. It was as if there was no upper limit. The reason why the heaven-devouring monstrous clan was so powerful was related to this special characteristic of theirs. However, if they were suppressed and were unable to devour enough blood and flesh, it would be very difficult for their clan to develop further. It was precisely because they were bloodthirsty that they succeeded and failed. Thus, comparatively speaking, they were easier to deal with. As long as their development was restricted, it would be impossible for the heaven-devouring monstrous clan to make any more waves. Moreover, over the past year or so, many experts of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan had participated in the rebellion. Most of them were slaughtered. The remaining experts were ordinary people. They would slowly be assimilated by the human race. In the end, they would become one of the many clans under the rule of the human race. The human race possessed this special characteristic of assimilation. Thus, there had never been a need for them to exterminate the other clans. Furthermore, due to the fact that the human race's movements were truly too fast, the other powerful clans that wanted to take action only heard the news of the human race occupying the territory of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan right after they had organized their armies. Thus, they couldn't help but beat their chests and stamp their feet. Why didn't they take action earlier? If they had taken action earlier, it would have been better if they had taken action earlier and seized a province or two. However, they had forgotten that they were also frightened by Yi Shiwen at the very beginning when they wanted to take action. The might he displayed when he massacred the heavenly venerables earlier was extremely frightening. Not everyone had the guts to provoke Yi Shiwen in such a situation. By the time they reacted, it was already too late. In fact, there was even news that the Eastern Heavenly Venerate was extremely furious at such a large-scale change. However, in the end, the matter was left unsettled. The reason for that was because the human race occupying the territory of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan was already a fact that could not be changed. Faced with the incomparably powerful Yi Shiwen, it was impossible for them to personally take action against him, unless the Eastern Heavenly Venerate personally instructed them to take action against Yi Shiwen. Otherwise, everything else would be for naught. During this year, it wasn't only the Eastern region that was in an upheaval. The entire Fortune God dynasty was in an uproar because of a single piece of news. A sovereign had massacred a heavenly venerate. Chapter 33-35. This news shocked the world as soon as it came out. This was because anything related to the heavenly venerables, even if it was just gossip, would become a hot topic of discussion once it came out. That group was too small. Even compared to the Emperor Lords, the number of heavenly venerables was still pitifully small. In the current world, the number of heavenly venerables that people were familiar with was quite limited. They could be counted on 2 hands. Among them, The most famous were naturally the four great heavenly venerables of the Fortune God dynasty. Any one of them was considered to be the best among the heavenly venerables. They were powerful existences that could suppress an entire region with their strength alone. But this didn't mean that the other Empyreans received less attention. As the strongest known powerhouses, their every move was watched by countless people. Moreover, for countless years, generation after generation of legends and myths had been passed down to them, sending them to their lofty thrones. What made the myths were not their boasting, but their actual battle records. Everyone could count the examples of emperor lords challenging heavenly venerables. Basically, they were killed in one move. If an emperor lord could escape from the attack of a heavenly venerables, it would be a kind of supreme honor. They would even be famous among the emperor lords. As for an emperor lord killing a heavenly venerables, no one had ever heard of such a thing. However, it had happened now. Although it happened suddenly, many super experts in the eastern region had witnessed it with their own eyes. From the beginning of the battle between the two until the end, when Yishiwen seriously injured the heaven-devouring demon emperor with the help of the amazing sword intent, and then a series of storm-like attacks, he finally succeeded in killing the heaven-devouring demon emperor. Everything was in their eyes, and it was precisely because of this that it seemed extremely unbelievable. Although Yishiwen had prepared a lot of means in the process, and many of them were amazing ideas that seemed unfair to the heaven-devouring demon emperor, no one would really think so. This was because the heaven-devouring demon emperor was far superior to Yishiwen in terms of cultivation realm alone. In fact, the heaven-devouring demon emperor should be the one being unfair. However, no matter how many people were looking for a reason, one thing that couldn't be ignored was that Yishiwen had really slaughtered a celestial master. For a time, his battle was recorded by others and became a hot commodity. Even though they could only watch it from afar and could not really see anything clearly, and only sovereign lords and above could view it. Otherwise, if they really probed into it with their primordial spirit, they would be turned into ashes by the sharp martial will of Yishiwen and the heaven-devouring demon monarch. But even so, it still couldn't stop everyone's enthusiasm. Many people regarded this battle as a textbook, a template. There were more than one or two people who wanted to kill a heavenly venerate. It was just that no one had ever succeeded. However, once someone succeeded, the myth of a heavenly venerate would be broken. The consequences would be unimaginable. Even though they knew that Yishiwen was an exception and couldn't be replicated, and even though they knew that it was also because the heaven-devouring demon monarch had just entered the heavenly venerate realm, once ambition was born, it would really be out of control. This was because once the slaughter was successful, it could be said that there would be great benefits. A heavenly venerate was an existence that was completely above an emperor lord. If they could kill a heavenly venerate, they would be able to obtain the comprehension of that heavenly venerate. The benefits for their own cultivation would be immeasurable, not to mention the other benefits. It could be said that although Yishiwen's action was for self-preservation, it had truly opened an era where even heavenly venerates could be challenged. Through Yishiwen's incident, everyone discovered that even the powerful heavenly venerates could be brought down. Of course, the premise was that there was a way to truly injure a heavenly venerate. It was very difficult for an ordinary emperor lord to injure a heavenly venerate. Therefore, although this method seemed to exist, it was actually not much different from not having it. From the battle, it could be seen that even if Yishiwen didn't have that mysterious sword intent of unknown origin, his own strength was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. A casual palm of the creation heaven and earth palm could kill an emperor lord. Even so, it was still very difficult for him to kill the heaven-devouring demon monarch. It could even be said that the heaven-devouring demon monarch had almost turned the tables. It was obvious that this matter was not easy. Just the heaven-devouring demon monarch, who had just entered the heavenly venerate realm, was already so difficult to deal with, let alone the other invincible existences with profound skills and unparalleled cultivation. After seeing the shadow recording, some people's hearts sank, while some people became extremely ambitious. This matter had only just begun to ferment. With the news of Yi Shiwen killing the heaven-devouring demon monarch, many emperor lords were ready to make a move. They even joined forces with each other to target the heavenly venerate experts. The entire creation realm was already in turmoil because of the opening of the path of creation. Now, the entire creation realm was in turmoil because of Yi Shiwen's incident. It was a chaotic scene everywhere. It had been hundreds of years since the human clan had devoured the heaven-devouring demon clan's territory. However, this wave of unrest had not stopped. On the contrary, it had become even more intense. It was like waves, one wave after another. Finally, this wave of unrest was pushed to its peak. The one who had triggered this wave of unrest was none other than the Pantheon Venerate. Everyone knew that the Pantheon Venerate had just escaped from a long period of suppression. In any case, no matter how strong an Emperor Lord's recovery ability was, it only referred to the recovery of his injuries. However, the vitality that he had lost over the years could not be replenished in a short period of time. This was because a heavenly venerate was not an ordinary person. It was unknown how many resources he would have to consume in order to recover to his peak. It was not that simple. Compared to other heavenly venerates, this was perhaps the best choice. Therefore, more than 20 Emperor Lords and foreign Emperor Lords joined forces and attacked the Pantheon Palace, catching him off guard. Relying on some heavenly venerate martial arts imprints that they had obtained, they attempted to injure and kill the Pantheon Venerate. They attempted to replicate what Yi Shiwen had done before. However, the Pantheon Venerate, who was furious, killed them all. None of the 20 Emperor Lords were spared. They did not even last 3 moves. This was under the situation where they had used the heavenly venerate martial arts imprints. Otherwise, if they were alone, they might not even be able to survive a single move. It should be known that these Emperor Lords were at least at the 7th realm and above. They were the best among the Emperor Lords. However, they were too weak in front of the Pantheon Venerate. Moreover, this was a heavenly venerate who was not at his peak. Needless to say, the other heavenly venerates were terrifying. It was simply unimaginable. This matter was like a bucket of cold water. It instantly pulled those Emperor Lords who had gone crazy from thinking about slaughtering the heavenly venerates out of their dreams. Yi Shiwen was able to do it because he was special. Not everyone could do it. If they forced themselves to do it, they would be courting death. Although the enraged, coiling Heaven Sovereign couldn't kill his way into the Fortune Divine Dynasty, the clans of the several Emperor-level masters who dared to besiege him were completely massacred. Not a single one of them remained. He even used a supernatural ability to place a bloodline curse on them. As long as the clans had the bloodline of these experts, all of them died in a single night. The entire outer domain was in a reign of terror. Although the Fortune God Dynasty's emperor monarchs and the sects they founded were fine, the death of one of their emperor monarchs was the most painful thing for them. Very soon, their territories were occupied by others, and their masters changed. After this incident, the incomparable fanaticism finally dissipated a little. Everyone finally understood that these heavenly venerates were not to be trifled with. At this time, everyone's attention returned to the initiator of this incident, Yi Shiwen. Some people even had ideas about the physical body of the heaven-devouring demon emperor in his hands. With the physical body of the heaven-devouring demon emperor, everything would be the same. Moreover, it seemed that Yi Shiwen was relatively easier to deal with. Although many people had seen him kill a heavenly venerate, there were still many people who felt that he was just lucky. Moreover, there was a clamor of people saying that he had achieved it through various means. It was also because of this that some people really felt that they could deal with Yi Shiwen. There was even a situation where many Emperor Lords joined forces to go to Mount Buzhou to denounce him. How could the newly rising human race cope with such a situation? The human emperor and the others were almost defeated in an instant. Those who rushed to find trouble with Yi Shiwen were at least in the 7th realm or above. Otherwise, they would not have the confidence to attack Yishuan. On the contrary, it was surprising that so many Emperor Lords had joined forces, but in fact, they could not even defeat a single clone of Yishuan. They were almost defeated in a tough manner. Yishuan had crushed them without any suspense. This was just a clone of Yishuan. The power of his real body could be seen from this. Through this incident, many people truly understood two principles. The first was that heavenly venerates should not be provoked. Otherwise, they would die. The second was that Yishuan should also not be provoked. Otherwise, they would also die. Whether they were willing or not, whether they believed it or not, this was an ironclad fact. There was no way to quibble or deny it. After this series of events spread, it also made Yishuan completely famous. His title as the number one person below the heavenly venerate had been thoroughly established. This was not boasting, but it was recognized by everyone. If anyone was dissatisfied, they could also try to kill a heavenly venerate alone. They could also use only one clone to block the joint forces of many Emperor Lords. Chapter 33-36. This was a result that was achieved through real battle results. It was not bragging. Everyone had seen it for themselves. This title brought great prestige and attention to the human race and Yishuan, but at the same time, it also brought great pressure. The fact that he was besieged by many Emperor Lords was a good example. In the end, Yishuan did not choose to go on a killing spree. Instead, he chose to repel them. Otherwise, no matter how calm the Fortune God dynasty was, they would not be able to watch Yishuan go on a killing spree. There must be a bottom line in everything. Once it was crossed, one would become the target of public criticism. Yishuan did not have the strength and confidence to be the target of public criticism. Moreover, he did not have the intention to become the target of public criticism. Yishuan had been in closed-door training for the past 100 years. The people who came to congratulate him didn't even get to see his face. Apart from organizations like the Sky Commerce Alliance and the Clear Sky Society, which had cooperated with him and had a pretty good relationship with him, the Battle Emperor had also personally come to congratulate him on behalf of the Easter Deity Mansion. There were also many other forces who came to congratulate him, and many congratulatory gifts. No matter what they thought, whether they were willing or not, it was already a fact that Yishuan had become the number one person below the heavenly venerate realm. Instead of going against him, it was better to befriend him. This was what those forces thought. These people didn't even get to see Yishuan's face. Even when many sovereign emperors joined forces, Yishuan didn't show up. A Sword Dao avatar attacked, holding the Avicii sword, and killed them. Everyone had also witnessed his strength. The news that Yishuan was in closed-door cultivation could not be hidden anymore. Soon, it spread throughout the Fortune realm and reached the ears of many people. Given Yishuan's current strength, it could be said that he had reached the peak of the Emperor realm. However, with his strength, he still needed to go into closed-door cultivation for a long time. What was the reason? Obviously, it was to break through to the legendary heavenly venerate realm. Originally, Yishuan did not have time because he was forced to a desperate state by the heaven-devouring demon emperor. Now that he had a lot of time, how could not make a breakthrough? He was now known as the number one person below the heavenly venerate realm. With the incident of slaughtering the heaven-devouring demon emperor, he had limitless glory. However, no matter how glorious he was, it was still not as glorious as breaking through to the heavenly venerate realm. If he didn't make a breakthrough now, when would he? Many people understood that they were waiting for Yishuan to make a breakthrough. While the outside world was in turmoil, Yishuan was wholeheartedly immersed in his comprehension. It wasn't that he wasn't aware of the ups and downs in the outside world, but it was precisely because of this that he needed to lay a good foundation. He knew that he was going to cross the tribulation, and it wouldn't be peaceful. He took advantage of the time when the heaven-devouring demon monarch had just completed his heavenly tribulation and killed him while he was still injured. It was hard to guarantee that the others would not have the same idea and join forces to kill him while he was undergoing his heavenly tribulation. The human heart was hard to fathom. He had to consider the worst-case scenario. So he had to make a new breakthrough before the tribulation. Some people could be said to be trembling with fear when crossing the heavenly Lord's heavenly tribulation. In the end, they would be lucky enough to cross it. However, that person definitely couldn't be Yishuan, because he wouldn't have such an opportunity. Once he started crossing the heavenly tribulation, no matter where he hid, he would inevitably be coveted. There were too many ambitious people in this world. Not to mention, there was also the divine fire heavenly Lord who was eyeing him covetously. Although he had previously said that he was in seclusion, who knew whether he had come out or not? Even if he didn't come out now, it was still possible that he would come out when the time came. These were all things that he had to consider. Therefore, even though he had already repeatedly surpassed the limits of the Emperor realm, he still hadn't begun to make a breakthrough. This was because he knew that he was still lacking some maturity. In the sacred court, Yishuan was sitting on a high cloud bed. Behind him was the Ming-Shin ancient tree, which was constantly shining with dazzling seven-colored light. In front of him was the Tao scripture stone inscription. Every ancient character engraved on it was emitting the light of the Great Path. They were characters that directly pointed to the Great Path. They were extremely mysterious and recorded many indescribable truths. What everyone could comprehend from them was completely different. At the same time, on his left side, the physical body of the heaven-devouring demon king was sitting cross-legged in the void, floating up and down. Various celestial venerate laws were manifested for Yishuan's reference. Many abilities and laws that belonged to celestial venerates were in his eyes. Every one of them could provide him with great inspiration. Celestial venerates were indeed existences that could seize the creation of heaven and earth. The truths contained within them were not something that ordinary people could imagine. Even emperors would find it difficult to analyze them. It would only be possible after many years. Only Yishuan, who relied on the support of the mysterious space, could quickly analyze the information and comprehension of the great path that belonged to him. In addition, within his body, the mysterious creation pill and the heaven-devouring blood pill were both swallowed in his stomach. They were constantly rotating, peeling off wisps of medicinal aura and being absorbed by his body. Even though he had already reached a certain limit, he was still constantly cultivating. He wanted to constantly refresh his own limits, which was also to refresh the construction of many emperors. Around his body, 3,000 martial arts had evolved. They were all evolving into a type of martial arts, which then evolved into martial arts. It was extremely impressive. Below him, below the cloud bed, was a giant dragon that was roaring loudly. However, this giant dragon was missing an arm and a leg. Although it was extremely huge, it was still a ghastly sight. Just looking at it would send chills down one's spine. This was the king-level dragon vein that Yishuan had subdued. At this moment, it was just right for him to use. It continuously extracted the spiritual energy from within his body. This allowed him to continuously comprehend the principles of a celestial venerate in preparation for the final sprint. Day after day, year after year, 1,000 years had passed. 1,000 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Even Yishuan himself didn't feel much. He only felt that time had passed in a very short period of time. In these 1,000 years, the chaos in the Fortune God dynasty, and even the Fortune realm, finally showed signs of easing. It was no longer as chaotic as it was before. The division of territories between the various powers had finally come to an end. After the various powers fought with all their might, the victor was finally determined. After the humans devoured the territories of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan, they immediately began to defend themselves and no longer fought over them. This was because the human emperor and the others knew very well that the human race could only swallow the heaven-devouring demon tribe's territory, because Yishuan was at the front, attracting all the firepower. Even so, it was still like swallowing a whale or a snake swallowing an elephant. If they were not careful, they would be stuffed to death. How would they dare to fight? Moreover, the human race didn't make a move and entered the digestion stage. This also made the other forces less vigilant towards the human race. They didn't treat the human race as a formidable enemy and guarded against them. Although they had Yi Shiwen, the strongest person under the Heavenly Master stage, they didn't have enough resources. Therefore, it was impossible for them to make a difference in this melee. In a situation where the Fortune God dynasty did not interfere, it was even more difficult for the small tribes and small sects to survive. They could only rely on the larger tribes and sects to survive. In this process, although the human race was mainly digesting the heaven-devouring demon tribes' territory, they had also taken in many vassal tribes, strengthening the human race's strength and reputation. Most importantly, the human race had finally pacified the heaven-devouring demon tribe's territory. After the experts of the heaven-devouring demon tribe were killed, the remaining ordinary clansmen of the heaven-devouring demon tribe, although they had some cultivation, their lifespans were not very long. In 1,000 years, the human race had changed several generations. For the heaven-devouring demon tribe, a generation had passed. A large number of heaven-devouring demon tribe members had aged or even died. What they took with them was the supreme glory of the heaven-devouring demon tribe. The new generation of heaven-devouring demon tribe had not experienced the glory of the heaven-devouring demon tribe. Thus, they did not have such a concept. Even if the elders of the heaven-devouring demon tribe constantly instilled such thoughts into them, it was not as convincing as the fact that the human race was powerful. As a result, the human race had finally passed through the most dangerous stage. They had already taken control of the 7 prefectures of the heaven-devouring demon tribe. Relying on the human race's astonishing reproduction ability, the ordinary clansmen of the human race had already spread throughout the 7 prefectures. Including the original 4 prefectures, there were now 11 great prefectures. This was already the standard of the top 10 strongest tribes. Although this was only the minimum standard of the top 10 strongest tribes, it had been a very long time since anyone had reached it. In the eyes of many people, whether the human race could become the 11th strongest tribe would depend on their own accumulation and foundation. Most importantly, it would depend on whether Yi Shiwen could make a breakthrough to the heavenly venerable realm. Because of this, the experts of both the human race and the other tribes had all set their eyes on the Great Zhou sacred mountain. This was also the person who was most likely to become a heavenly venerable after the heaven-devouring demon emperor. The conditions for the birth of a heavenly venerable was much harsher than that of an emperor. There might not even be a single heavenly venerable in 10 million years. The next heavenly venerable might very well be born right before their eyes. Being able to witness the birth of a heavenly venerable with their own eyes was extremely beneficial to their cultivation. Under such circumstances, Yi Shiwen came out of his closed-door training under the watchful eyes of everyone. Just when everyone thought that he was going to transcend the heavenly venerable heavenly tribulation in the sky beyond heaven, he did not do so. Instead, he headed straight for the divine capital of fortune, the core of the Fortune God dynasty. Along the way, countless people's eyes were on Yi Shiwen. However, he did not care. Even when he passed by the #1 super sect in the eastern region, the Heavenly Tao sect, he could clearly feel that a supreme existence was watching him. However, he did not care. He just passed by and entered the divine capital of fortune. Chapter 33-37. Yi Shiwen's entrance and exit attracted the attention of everyone in the world. With the title of the world's #1 emperor, he was almost the world's #1 expert now that celestial masters rarely showed themselves. In addition, he didn't keep a low profile either. He dragged his purple aura for 15 million miles. Not to mention the top experts who were paying attention to him. Even ordinary creatures would kneel on the ground, tremble, and sincerely worship him when he passed by. Swaggering through the city, there were more than 1 or 2 people who disliked Yi Shiwen's behavior. Some veteran powerhouses were naturally dissatisfied with Yi Shiwen, who had been in the limelight recently. Although they knew that what he had done was difficult for ordinary people to do, they were still unhappy in their hearts. They didn't know when such a junior had achieved the Tao, but he had climbed above their heads and became the so-called #1 person in the world. How could they be pleased with this? But even so, there was no one who dared to come out and criticize him. Those who dared to go against Yishuan had already joined forces to attack Buzhou's sacred mountain and were easily defeated by him. Yishuan had entered the Fortune Divine capital and had collected the purple clouds that filled the sky. This didn't match with his usual low-key style. However, he knew one thing. Sometimes, it was a good thing to be low-key. However, it wouldn't be a good thing if everything was low-key. He still had to be high-key. He had to let everyone know how powerful he was. If he had been replaced by an emperor like the Battle Emperor, who had existed since ancient times, would there still be a situation like Buzhou, Sacred Mountain, being besieged by the emperors? At this time, he was a flag of the human race. His low-key would make many people think that the human race was weak and easy to bully. In this chaotic world where thousands of races were rising, the so-called peaceful development was a joke. There was only life and death. Only by being tough would people not think that they were easy to bully. Even if the human race could withstand these storms, their own development would be delayed. What Yishuan needed to do now was to become the pillar that held up the sky for the human race. In the history of the human race, there was no lack of people like this. One of the three ancestors of the human race, the Sui Sovereign, did this in the myriad worlds and the fortune world. He fought his way to the top of the human race, and after that, the three sovereigns and 5 monarchs descended to the world, establishing the human race's position. Then, the Qin monarch appeared out of nowhere and cleaned up the old land, carrying the sky of the human race on his shoulders alone. Then, Yishuan rose to power and brought the human race to an unprecedented peak. Generation after generation, it had never been cut off. Yishuan's high profile naturally had this intention. However, there was no need to continue being so high profile after entering the Fortune Divine capital. Someone came to welcome him immediately. It was none other than the Battle Emperor. Fellow Taoist Martial Emperor, I haven't seen you for a few days, and you're even more elegant than before. Congratulations. The Battle Emperor cupped his hands and said. In his eyes, Yishuan was simply like the sea of stars, unfathomable. In the past, he could still look up to his back, but now he couldn't even look up to his back. When he returned to the Fortune Divine capital, he wanted to use the power of the Fortune God dynasty to restrain the heaven-devouring monster monarch so that he wouldn't cause trouble for Yishuan. Who would have thought that before he could act, Yishuan would kill the heaven-devouring monster monarch single-handedly? When he heard this news, he felt that his worldview had completely collapsed. An emperor monarch could actually slaughter a heavenly venerate. Even under such extreme circumstances, it was still a miracle that couldn't be replicated. And the person who created this miracle was none other than Yishuan. When he first saw Yishuan even had to greet him as a junior. But now, he had grown to become a peerless expert. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before he became a heavenly venerate. After not seeing him for 1,000 years, Yishuan's strength had really reached an incredible level. Even though he hadn't become a heavenly venerate, his strength was still constantly increasing. This was the most incredible thing about Yishuan. Looking at Brother Battle Emperor, could it be that you're preparing to undergo the heavenly tribulation? Yishuan asked. He could naturally see that the Battle Emperor's cultivation, which hadn't improved for a long time, was actually starting to make a breakthrough again. With his current cultivation, he could naturally see through the Battle Emperor's intentions at a glance. Indeed, I'm planning to wait until this matter is settled, then go deep into the starry sky and find a place to undergo the heavenly tribulation, said the Battle Emperor. If it was someone else, he naturally wouldn't say it. The Peak Emperor Monarch's heavenly tribulation was naturally the most secretive matter. If he was ambushed and killed by his enemies at this time, it was very likely that he would die with a grudge. Such things were not uncommon in history. In fact, more than half of those who failed were ultimately killed by their enemies after attracting them. However, if it was Yishuan, there was no harm. The Battle Emperor trusted Yishuan's character. The two of them could be considered comrades who had fought side by side, so naturally, they were different. Moreover, he still had something to ask of Yishuan. When the time comes, I might have to trouble you to protect me. The heavens' retribution was only a part of the Emperor Realm's retribution. The human retribution was the most terrifying part. Even if one successfully passed the heavens' retribution, he might still be ambushed and killed by his enemies. At that time, he would be at his weakest. Anything could happen. The heaven-devouring Demon King had been ambushed and killed by his enemies at the last moment. It had left a hidden injury that couldn't be healed for a long time. Yishuin didn't know where the heaven-devouring Demon Emperor was going to cross the tribulation. Otherwise, he would have probably charged into the heavenly tribulation and killed the heaven-devouring Demon Emperor who was crossing the tribulation. However, in the Battle Emperor's opinion, if they had a peerless powerhouse like Yi Shiwen to protect them, then there was nothing to worry about. The only thing to worry about was the possibility of a surprise attack from a foreign heavenly venerable. In order to prevent another peerless powerhouse from appearing in the Fortune God dynasty, it wasn't impossible for a foreign heavenly venerable to make a move. On the other hand, if it was a foreign domain's master undergoing tribulation, the Fortune Divine Dynasty's heavenly venerables might also intervene. However, if it really involved a heavenly venerable powerhouse, the Fortune Divine Dynasty's heavenly venerables weren't to be trifled with. In this case, with Yi Shiwen's protection, it could be said that there were many benefits, and the success rate would be greatly increased. It's fine. When the time comes, fellow Taoist Battle Emperor, just let me know. I won't hesitate to go through fire and water for you. Yi Shiwen replied straightforwardly. The Battle Emperor had helped him a lot. After he returned from the path of creation, it was the Battle Emperor who had helped him obtain rewards for killing the Lightning Lord, the Night Emperor, and the others. At the same time, he had also helped him erase the crime of killing the Eaglehorn Emperor and the other 10 great emperors. The Battle Emperor's contributions couldn't go unnoticed, as the Fortune God dynasty didn't get angry and attack him. Yishuin didn't say these things out loud, but he remembered them in his heart. Not to mention that he might need the Battle Emperor's help in the future. On the path of cultivation, it was common for people to help each other. In that case, I'll have to thank you, the Battle Emperor said with cupped hands. His heart was calm. Countless years had passed, and he was finally going to take this step. Once he crossed this step, everything would be completely different. He would become one of the few rulers. However, I haven't asked, why did the Fortune God dynasty forcefully summon me to the Fortune God capital? Yishuin asked. The reason why he gave up on his closed-door cultivation this time was not only because his cultivation had reached a peak, but also because he was summoned to the Fortune God capital by the Fortune God dynasty. It had been several thousand years since he entered the Fortune realm and joined the Fortune God dynasty, but he had never received an official decree. However, what made him slightly unhappy was the condescending and overbearing tone of the decree. A long time ago, even the Battle Emperor wouldn't speak to him in such an overbearing tone. Now he had the entire world in his sights. Even if he included those old fellows who were cultivating in seclusion, he was confident that he was invincible except for heavenly venerables. Naturally, he was unhappy. The Battle Emperor could also sense the displeasure in Yishuin's heart. Immediately, an awkward expression appeared on his face. He said, "This is not the place to talk. Fellow Taoist Martial Emperor, please follow me." Yishuin looked around. All the spies from the various forces had arrived. How could he not attract the attention of the various forces by coming here in such a high-profile manner? This wasn't the first time he had entered the Fortune God dynasty. At that time, his strength wasn't bad. However, in the eyes of many people, he was mediocre. It wasn't enough to move them. However, it was different now. He was like the sun in the sky. Who would dare to ignore him? Then he nodded his head. The two of them went straight into the Battle Emperor's residence. Only then did the prying eyes disappear. The Battle Emperor entered the residence and directly brought Yi Shiwen to a secret room. After the two of them sat down, Yi Shiwen continued to ask. From the tone of the decree, it seems very unyielding. Why? Did a heavenly venerate come out? At this time, he was no longer ignorant about the heavenly venerables of the Fortune God dynasty. No matter how weak the foundation of the human race was, it was still considered a powerful force. He could obtain a lot of information. The Fortune God dynasty had been in a situation where heavenly venerables didn't come out many years ago. It was presided over by a few peak emperor lords. Other than super veteran experts like the Battle Emperor, there were also various chief officials. All of them were super experts in the Ninth Realm. Usually, when heavenly venerables didn't come out, they would handle the affairs of the court. No one knew what the heavenly venerables were doing. However, the four heavenly venerables of the north, south, east, and west were all busy with the same thing. They didn't appear. Because of this, he said this. Other than heavenly venerables, who dare to speak to him in such a lofty manner? The Battle Emperor couldn't help but reveal an awkward expression. He then said, actually, no heavenly venerables have come out. All the lords are still in seclusion in the depths of the Fortune God capital. The affairs of the court have always been managed by us. Oh, since no heavenly venerables have come out, I would like to ask, who is so lofty? Yishuan said unhappily. He was unhappy when he received the decree. In the end, he still chose to come. It was fine when he was alone. However, for the sake of the human race, he still didn't want to go against a colossus like the Fortune God dynasty. Chapter 33-38. Although he didn't want to go against the Fortune God dynasty, he wasn't someone who was afraid of trouble, so he asked directly. The Battle Emperor had a look of understanding. Obviously, he already knew that Yishuan would ask about this matter. Although Yishuan always looked calm in front of him, the Battle Emperor knew that Yishuan was a lawless and daring person. What kind of person was the Eaglehorn Emperor Lord and the Night Emperor? He killed them just like that. When the sky-devouring demon king threatened him, he went to the sky-devouring demon tribe's ancestral land alone and killed him. He didn't care about the criticism of others and was indifferent to the iron rule that emperor lords couldn't challenge heavenly venerables. Such a person, regardless of how gentle he looked on the surface, had a heart higher than the sky. If he treated others with sincerity, he would return the sincerity. However, if he wanted to be high and mighty, he would suffer a backlash sooner or later. We are born free. Who dares to be high and mighty? This was the kind of person who was born free. Not to mention, who wasn't arrogant when they cultivated to their level. If he was in Yishuan's shoes, he would also be extremely unhappy. Speaking of which, this is related to a newly promoted heavenly venerate of the Fortune God dynasty. The Battle Emperor said, fellow Taoist came from the myriad worlds, so I'm sure you don't know many of the Fortune God dynasty secrets. In our Fortune God dynasty, other than the East, South, West, and West great heavenly venerates, there is also a heavenly venerate that directly belongs to the Fortune God dynasty. His name is Spacetime Heavenly Venerate. He once ruled the vast land of the Central Region tens of millions of years ago. Although he hasn't been cultivating the Tao for a long time, the time and space laws he cultivates are extremely profound and have reached an unbelievable level. He could be compared to the East, South, West, and West great heavenly venerates. He almost became a middle heavenly venerate. Spacetime heavenly venerate, spacetime law? Yishuan raised his eyebrows slightly. Using the spacetime law to cultivate meant that he had amazing attainments in this aspect. In this aspect, Yishuan was also very confident that he wasn't weaker than others. The Fortune God dynasty wasn't like the myriad heavens. The Tao in a myriad heavens was too narrow, so if someone had walked this path, the future generations wouldn't be able to follow in their footsteps. But it was completely different in the Fortune Divine dynasty. It was normal for similar Taoists to coexist in this world. But what does this have to do with the Spacetime Heavenly Lord? Asked Yishuan. Spacetime Empyrean ruled the Central Region for a very long time. Although he didn't become a Middle Empyrean, his prestige didn't fall. Later, he escaped into the depths of the Fortune Divine capital along with the North, South, East, and West Empyreans. He hasn't been involved in any affairs for many years. The Battled Arch said, not long ago, the Spacetime Heavenly Lord, who has not been involved in any affairs for many years, suddenly sent God Emperor Rui to take over the Fortune God dynasty's authority. He also gathered experts from all over the fortune god capital. Taoist martial emperor, you are only one of them. Emperor god Rui? In that case, this decree was given by god Emperor Rui. Yi Shiwen immediately grasped the main point of the battle emperor's words. Everything must be related to Emperor god Rui. There must be a connection. But what's the background of this Emperor god Rui? How can he be in charge of the fortune god capital and issue a decree in the name of the fortune god dynasty? Yi Shiwen couldn't help but be a little curious. One should know that even an illustrious veteran emperor like the battle emperor, who had an extremely high cultivation and followed the fortune god monarch to conquer the world, didn't dare to say that he could cover the sky with one hand in the fortune god capital. He could only say that he had a lot of authority. However, there were still various chief officials and the battle emperor competing with each other. This emperor god Rui could actually command the heroes. Even a veteran emperor like the battle emperor had to bow his head and obey his orders. This was rare. Yi Shiwen didn't believe that Emperor God Rui's cultivation was so high that he was invincible. At his level of cultivation, he was well-versed in everything. He dared to say that no emperor would be able to compare to him. Even for him, it was possible for the battle emperor to respect him, but it was impossible for him to make the battle emperor bend his head and listen to his orders. Unless he became a heavenly lord, that was impossible. Yes, this emperor god Rui was actually formed from the jade Rui that space-time heavenly lord carried with him. When he travels outside, it is equivalent to space-time heavenly lord standing in front of him. In addition, his cultivation is not inferior to mine, so it is inevitable that he is a little arrogant, said the battle emperor. He could understand this. Don't be fooled by his amiable attitude towards Yi Shiwen. That was because Yi Shiwen had the qualifications to do so. He wouldn't be so amiable towards others. Of course, ordinary people didn't even have the qualifications to get close to him. It's just that Emperor God Rui has been serving space-time Heavenly Lord all these years. He has been in a different plane within the Fortune God capital all year round. It is reasonable that Taoist Martial Emperor doesn't know him. Yi Shiwen naturally understood what the Battle Emperor meant. It was reasonable that he didn't know Emperor God Rui. On the other hand, Emperor God Rui had been in a different plane for a long time. He didn't know the current elites, and it was normal that he didn't know Yi Shiwen. He immediately understood that Emperor God Rui had the support of space-time Heavenly Lord, not to mention that his own strength was tyrannical. In terms of the Battle Emperor, he had the reputation of being the number one person below the Heavenly Lord back then. It was just that there was a lot of controversy back then. He wasn't as well-deserved as Yi Shiwen, who everyone believed in. He couldn't imagine how tyrannical Yi Shiwen was now. What he could imagine was that the Battle Emperor was already at his limit. Naturally, he wouldn't be courteous to him. It was no wonder that the Battle Emperor would use the term servant. Although an emperor wasn't as strong as a heavenly lord, he was also a person who had achieved great things. It was impossible for an ordinary relationship to be a servant. Even if the Battle Emperor and the Butterfly Sovereign were master and disciple, the Butterfly Sovereign wouldn't be able to accompany them. After all, she was also a ruler. However, it was another matter for Emperor God Rui and Space-Time Heavenly Lord. Emperor God Rui was able to gain spiritual wisdom and cultivate to such a level. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was their second parent. So he has a great background. No wonder. Yi Shiwen said calmly. The Battle Emperor laughed bitterly. Emperor God Rui obviously didn't take Yi Shiwen, who was currently famous, seriously. He was still using his old eyes to measure the world. He felt that it was already the limit for an emperor to cultivate to such a level. He definitely wouldn't believe that a monster like Yi Shiwen existed. On the other hand, Yi Shiwen obviously didn't take Emperor God Rui seriously either. He only said that Emperor God Rui had a great background. As for Emperor God Rui's cultivation and strength, Yi Shiwen didn't care at all. However, he soon felt relieved. Although he didn't know what level Yi Shiwen had reached, it was definitely unfathomable. It wasn't something that someone of his level could compare with. With such strength as a foundation, It was no wonder that he didn't take Emperor God Ru-Yi seriously. He had the qualifications and the strength to do so. But what I want to know is, why did you summon us here with such great fanfare? Yishuan couldn't help but ask. I'm not very clear about the specifics. I only know that Emperor God Ru-Yi was ordered by the various lords to gather all the experts here. As for the specifics, I'll have to wait for him to tell me personally, said the Battle Emperor. Well, in that case, let's go and meet this Emperor God Ru-Yi. Yishuan couldn't be bothered to waste time. One should know that he was now only one step away from passing the Heaven's Retribution. Once he became a heavenly lord, he would be able to become one of the rulers of the world. Yes, the Battle Emperor didn't say much. He directly sent the two of them to a secondary plane through a teleportation array in the palace. The entire place was filled with the singing of birds and the fragrance of flowers. It looked like a scene of immortals. Clouds and mist lingered everywhere. In this environment of clouds and mist, a tall throne made of white jade floated in midair. On the throne sat a powerful figure. One couldn't see the specific figure, but one could sense the strength of these figures. Any one of them was a powerful figure that could influence the entire Fortune God dynasty. Among these thrones, there was one that was obviously a head taller than everyone else. Sitting on it was a jade-like middle-aged man. His face was as sharp as a knife, and his eyes were as sharp as two swords that could cut through anything. After Yishuan and the Battle Emperor arrived, two thrones automatically rose from below, corresponding to the two of them. After the two of them sat down, the jade-like middle-aged man said, "Martial Emperor, you're in the limelight. You've caused such a commotion along the way, and you made me wait here for you." Everyone turned to look at Yishuan. It was obvious that Emperor God Ru-Yi had pointed a spear at Yishuan. There were some who knew Emperor God Ru-Yi and knew that he wasn't a broad-minded person. Yishuan had been in the limelight recently and was known as the number one person below the Heavenly Venerables. If Yishuan was the number one person below the Heavenly Venerables, what would Emperor God Ru-Yi do? Many people were able to see through this contradiction clearly. Yishuan frowned slightly, and the corners of his mouth drooped slightly. Before he could speak, the Battle Emperor spoke up to smooth things over. He said, "I was the one who invited Dao, friend, Martial Emperor, to my palace first. Sorry for making everyone wait." Seeing this, Emperor God Ru-Yi could only drop the matter. The Battle Emperor had great prestige in the Fortune God dynasty, and he had made outstanding contributions. Even if he wanted to flare up, he couldn't do it to the Battle Emperor. If that's the case, forget it. But I have to remind some people not to get carried away just because they have some small achievements. They don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Emperor God Ru-Yi glanced at Yishuan and said. Yishuan raised his eyebrows. He finally understood that Emperor God Ru-Yi had come for him. That edict was so impolite. Perhaps others might not receive such an edict like him. It was filled with words such as order and must. Don't worry about it. I can still measure the immensity of heaven and earth. If you have something to say, say it. Don't waste time. Since he was sure that the other party was here for him, Yishuan naturally wouldn't be polite. Chapter 33-39. Those present were undoubtedly the cream of the crop among the emperors of the Fortune God dynasty. Only those who were at least peak emperors were qualified to be called here. It was impossible for the super experts from the north, south, east, west, and middle regions to be completely convinced of each other's superiority. Looking at the two sides that were about to erupt into conflict, everyone had a playful look on their faces. Both sides were extraordinary. Emperor God Ru-Yi's strength was one of the best even among the emperors. He was extremely tyrannical. Not to mention, he had the unimaginably powerful figure of space-time Heavenly Lord behind him. On the other side, Yishuan was no ordinary person either. He was a terrifying existence that could kill a Heavenly Lord. He was the one who changed the structure of the world and broke the myth of the Heavenly Lord. None of them were to be trifled with. Therefore, no one intended to intervene in this matter. This was not someone they could interfere with. However, many people knew that Emperor God Rui's intention to target Yi Shiwen was most likely related to Eagle Horn Emperor. After all, Yi Shiwen had only been in the Fortune God dynasty for a short period of time. There were many things he did not know. Before Emperor God Rui followed Space-Time Heavenly Lord into seclusion in the depths of the Fortune God dynasty, she had a very good relationship with Eagle Horn Emperor. It was rumored that Eagle Horn Emperor had saved Emperor God Rui many years ago. Since then, they had a very good relationship. When Emperor Eagle Horn was in danger, it was Emperor God Rui who came forward to resolve it. Everyone knew about it back then. However, after Emperor God Rui went into seclusion, no one knew about it. Only the old monsters who had lived for many years knew the reason. Emperor God Rui was targeting Yi Shiwen now because he wanted to avenge Eagle Horn Emperor. Although Yi Shiwen didn't know the crux of the matter, he could feel Emperor God Rui's hostility. He didn't expect the fall of Emperor Eagle Horn to bring him such trouble. However, even if he knew what he should do, he would still do it. The Battle Thearka's previous opinion of him was very accurate. Once he had made a decision, he would definitely not be overcautious. Hence, in the eyes of many people, he was lawless and dared to kill and destroy anyone. Forget about Emperor God Rui. What could the space-time Heavenly Lord do to him when he survived the heavenly tribulation? Emperor God Rui's face darkened. The fact that Yi Shiwen dared to go against him was beyond his expectations. Initially, he thought that Yi Shiwen wouldn't dare to be presumptuous since he was representing the Fortune God dynasty. As for taking revenge for the Eagle Horn monarch, that had to be done slowly. No matter what, someone who was able to kill the Eagle Horn monarch, one of the 10 great monarchs, was definitely not someone to be trifled with. Although he was furious, he was not a brainless person. However, seeing that Yi Shiwen was only at this level, he couldn't help feeling a little disappointed. Even though he knew that it was impossible for Yi Shiwen to win, there was another thought in his mind. If Yi Shiwen couldn't endure this humiliation and rebelled against the Fortune God dynasty in a fit of rage, then he could mobilize the Fortune God dynasty's resources to deal with Yi Shiwen. No matter how strong he was, even if he was the strongest emperor who could slaughter heavenly masters, he would still die a miserable death. No one could resist the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Unfortunately, Yi Shiwen didn't let him have his way. Even though Yi Shiwen didn't know what Emperor God Rui was planning, he wasn't stupid. He knew that going against the space-time Heavenly Lord and going against the Fortune God Dynasty were two completely different concepts. Going against the space-time Heavenly Lord was nothing, but going against a colossus like the Fortune God Dynasty, the consequences would be unpredictable. Unless he could reach the supreme realm of the Fortune God Monarch, then he could be invincible and fearless. Emperor God Rui snorted coldly, then said, "If that's the case, then I'll say it. According to the instructions of the Lords, the Fortune God Dynasty has to activate the Fortune Chaos Array, and everyone has to occupy a key area. No one is allowed to leave without permission until the Lords come out." Even though the other Emperor Gods had heard about it, they didn't expect it to be this. What kind of existence was the Primordial Creation Array? It was a supreme array set up by the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch. It was even more powerful than the array set up by a Heavenly Venerable. It was a top secret among top secrets. Since ancient times, there had only been a few opportunities to use it. The activation process was very complicated, and it required the Emperor Gods to be the eyes of different parts of the array. Some even required a Heavenly Lord to be in position. Since ancient times, how many dangers were there that were worth it? The Fortune God Dynasty was located in the core of the Fortune God Dynasty's territory. Since ancient times, no one had been able to fight their way here. The few times it was used were during the early days of the Fortune God Dynasty's establishment. At that time, there were some extremely terrifying Emperor-level life forms in the outer domain. Now that those Emperor-level life forms had passed away, no one could do it anymore. Therefore, the Chaos Origin Formation of Good Fortune became a legend. Everyone had heard of the legend of the Chaos Origin Formation of Good Fortune, but in reality, besides the battle of the Arch, not many people had actually seen the power of the chaos origin formation of good fortune. What caught everyone's attention even more was what had happened to force the heavenly venerables to use the universe creation array. There was too much information contained in this. Everyone couldn't react for a while, but their expressions were extremely solemn. If this was really the case, then it was likely that they would face a catastrophe. It had to be known that with the many defensive array formations and enchantments of the Fortune God dynasty, even an heavenly lord would be trapped within and might even die. There was no need to activate the Fortune Chaos Array at all. This caused everyone to be even more shocked and vigilant. There must be a reason behind this abnormality. This was not something that only one person understood. Everyone understood this principle. However, they couldn't figure out the origin of this matter. It must be because it involved the level of a heavenly lord, so it was completely blocked. Most of these old monsters had lived for hundreds of millions of years. Even battle thearchs had lived for more than that. Even if the Arch only lived for tens of millions of years, this was still a very long time. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be anything that would shock them. However, at this moment, they started to panic. This matter had obviously gone out of their control, and this was the worst possible outcome for them. Moreover, they couldn't leave without permission. These 4 words made them feel a sense of foreboding, but it was useless even if they wanted to say anything. They knew that they couldn't refuse. Over the years, they had relied on the Fortune God dynasty to obtain so many benefits and cultivation resources that ordinary people couldn't even imagine. Now, they could leave if they wanted to. The Fortune God dynasty wasn't a charity organization that could come and go as they pleased. Since we've already put it this way, it's not a problem for us to protect you if you need us. However, you should at least let us know what's going on. Do you want us to die here without knowing the reason? A cold and eccentric voice sounded. It was another eccentric old monster. If it wasn't for the fact that there were more than one heavenly lord behind them, it would be impossible for Emperor God Rui to order them around. Everyone's expressions turned grave. These words were somewhat harsh. There was nothing more vicious than asking them, sovereign emperors, to die here. Everyone turned to look at Emperor God Rui. This person had merely spoken their minds. At this time, they naturally wanted to hear the answer they wanted to hear. Yi Shiwen leaned his head against the back of the chair and closed his eyes to rest. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile, and his fingers rhythmically tapped on the armrest. This matter was too big, and he wasn't the only one who was worried. If one were to say that he was lawless and had a tough personality, then so what if he was one of those old monsters? There were quite a few of them who had a bad temper. It was just that there were very few things that could move them, so they all pretended to be unfathomable and serious. He had a hunch that the waters of the Fortune God dynasty were unfathomable. But this time, those hidden people behind the scenes were finally going to reveal their true colors. If it was in the past, he would probably feel an unprecedented pressure, but it was different now. He was going to undergo the tribulation soon. Once he succeeded, he would become one of those people. No matter how big the world was, he could go anywhere he wanted. The feeling of a bird flying high in the sky and a fish leaping in the sea surged in his heart. Being stared at by so many top experts, Emperor God Rui couldn't help but feel his scalp go numb. He then said, "This matter has nothing to do with you, so don't ask too much. As for activating the chaos origin formation of creation, it's just a precaution. If there really is a strong enemy attacking, we won't be caught off guard. If there isn't, that's for the best. TSK, isn't that the same as not saying anything? I don't want to be a muddle-headed ghost who doesn't even know how he died." That sovereign lord spoke again with a sneer on his face and said in a strange tone. Emperor God Rui pulled a long face and said, "This is a decision made by all the celestial masters. It's not up to you to say anything. If you have any questions, wait for the celestial masters to come out of seclusion. Now listen to my orders. From today onwards, the Fortune God Capital will activate the chaos origin formation of creation. No one is allowed to enter or leave until the celestial masters come out of seclusion. What about our work? We cannot go out at all. That's right. Are we all going to be trapped here? What the hell is going on? Why is it so serious? Many peak emperor gods said unhappily. The celestial masters will come out of seclusion in a few years. How many official affairs can there be for you to handle in a few years? Don't think I don't know. This matter is not to be doubted. Don't say any more. Emperor God Rui said firmly. His eyes swept over everyone, especially when he looked at Yi Shiwen. There was a bit of hostility in his eyes. Chapter 3340. Although Yi Shiwen's eyes were closed, he could still feel Emperor God Rui Yi's gaze on him. He smirked. It seemed that Emperor God Rui didn't have as much authority as he had imagined. Even the Battle Emperor wouldn't dare say that he could cover the sky with one hand, let alone Emperor God Rui Yi. He reckoned that the only reason she would listen to his summons was because of the space-time Heavenly Lord behind him. Others might be afraid, but he wasn't. If Emperor God Rui Yi dared to plot against him, he would definitely let her know how powerful he was. Of course, I don't have any objections to the Heavenly Lord's orders. However, I think there's no one more suitable than the Battle Emperor to take charge of the overall situation. Be it in terms of strength or experience, he's the most suitable. What do you all think? Emperor God Rui Yi's gaze fell on Yi Shiwen. He finally opened his eyes and turned to look at the crowd. Emperor God Rui Yi's gaze sharpened like two steel knives. Unfortunately, he was facing Yi Shiwen. He didn't feel anything from such a murderous gaze. That's true. If the Battle Emperor were to step in, I'd be convinced. He's a senior who has fought alongside the fortune creation Heavenly Lord. There were many people who were unhappy with Emperor God Rui Yi's arrogant demeanor. Although they might not like Yi Shiwen, Emperor God Rui Yi was the one they disliked the most. The Battle Emperor smiled bitterly. He knew that Yi Shiwen was targeting Emperor God Rui Yi, but Yi Shiwen was using him as a shield. However, he only smiled bitterly for a moment before regaining his composure. Just as Yi Shiwen had said, even if he was the one in charge, he was qualified to do so under the Heavenly Venerables. Cut the crap. Emperor God Rui was also speechless for a moment because the Battle Arch wasn't any weaker than him and was more experienced than him. He couldn't possibly say that the Battle Arch had a celestial master backing him up. This was something that everyone knew. If he were to say it out loud, he would really be embarrassing himself. Don't try to disrupt the meeting. Otherwise, I won't be polite. Emperor God Rui Yi stared coldly at Yi Shiwen. He couldn't wait to tear him into pieces. Be polite. I want to see how you're going to be impolite. Yi Shiwen straightened his body and put his hands on the armrests. He had a somewhat impolite expression on his face. The throne that he was sitting on was also rising all the way up. It was even faintly higher than the God Emperor Yi's. He was looking down at him condescendingly. God Emperor Rui Yi was enraged. He had arranged for these thrones to be distributed in such a manner so as to show that he was superior to everyone else. However, Yi Shiwen was clearly disobeying his arrangements and was even above him. Courting death, Emperor God Rui finally couldn't hold it in any longer. He was extremely furious. He stretched out his crystal-clear hand, but it exuded an extremely dangerous vibe. Although he was able to cultivate to this level because of Time Heavenly Lord, it would be a huge mistake if everyone treated him as a pushover. Shao Chun would be able to suppress a regular peak sovereign emperor in an instant. He was extremely strong. After not making a move for so many years, he could no longer endure it. However, it was a pity that his opponent was Yi Shiwen, a monster who had reached an unprecedented peak. Just as this big hand was about to hit Yi Shiwen's body, a kind of terrifying coercion spread out with his body as the center and spread out in all directions. An aura that transcended everything flooded the entire world and suddenly made everyone feel suffocated. Before the huge jade-like hand could land on Yi Shiwen's head, it had already exploded and turned into a sky full of jade aura. It disappeared without a trace. Yi Shiwen didn't move. He only had a playful smile on his face. It was obvious that the previous attack was nothing to him. Emperor Godrue Yi's expression was extremely ugly. Yi Shiwen, who had recently become famous, was far more powerful than the rumors said. The group of emperors had no intention of making a move. Battle Emperor and the others knew Yi Shiwen's strength. They knew that there was no need to do so. With his strength, he could even kill a heavenly master. Even if there was some element of luck involved, there was no doubt about his own strength. The others wanted to see how strong this new number one person below the heavenly master was. However, looking at it now, they realized that Yi Shiwen's strength was much stronger than they had imagined. Under the situation where Emperor God Ru Yi attacked in anger, Yi Shiwen didn't take any action. He only released his aura to break Emperor God Ru Yi's attack. Such strength was indeed impressive. Although they hadn't seen him make a move, they could already guess a thing or two. All right. Now that everyone is gathered here, I don't think we're here to quarrel. We're here to complete the task that the heavenly masters have given us, right? At this moment, Battle Emperor stood up and became the peacemaker. He gave the two parties who were about to start a war a way out. I'll forget about it this time. I'll let you go. Next, I'll distribute the formation map. As this formation is very large, everyone only needs to remember their own portion. Emperor Godrue Yi snorted coldly and went with the flow. If they really fought, he wasn't completely confident that he could defeat or even kill Yi Shiwen. He could only go with the flow. Yi Shiwen smiled faintly. Very quickly, he received his own array diagram. If Emperor Godru Yi didn't give him the array diagram, that would be exactly what he wanted. After all, he had no intention of guarding the divine capital of fortune, especially when he was about to undergo heaven's retribution. Giving him such a move now would undoubtedly restrict him. If he waited until he passed heaven's retribution, who could force him to do anything? Unfortunately, Emperor Godrue didn't let him have his way. She still distributed the formation map. Yi Shiwen immediately immersed himself in looking at it. The more he looked, the more he felt that this formation map was extensive and profound. Although he didn't specialize in the Tao of array formations, he still had a deep understanding of it. In terms of what he had learned, even a small part of this array formation was far better than what he had learned. It would take a long time just to comprehend the formation diagram in his hand. Moreover, he had the help of the mysterious space. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to do it. At the very least, it was impossible for a sovereign emperor to do it. Even a sovereign emperor who specialized in the Tao of formations would not be able to do it. If he looked at the entire formation map, he didn't know how long it would take him to understand it. Fortunately, some key points were clearly explained in the formation map. He didn't need to do it. He just needed to follow the instructions to unleash the greatest power of the formation. This was also the greatest use of these formation maps. Everyone should control a part of the formation. When combined, it would form the entire chaos origin formation of good fortune. On one hand, it prevented an emperor king from controlling the entire formation. In this way, even a peak emperor king wouldn't be able to control it all. An emperor lord's ability to calculate was very strong, but there were simply too many changes within the good fortune primordial origin array. It was possible for each person to control a portion of it, but it was impossible for them to control all. Secondly, he could use the power of these peak emperor kings to strengthen the formation. It was killing two birds with one stone. Yi Shiwen had been a little reluctant at first. However, he didn't feel so reluctant now. His trip had not been in vain. It was only a part of the great fortune primordial array. However, it was enough to make his cultivation in the Tao of array formations increase by leaps and bounds. Yi Shiwen was a little reluctant at first. In the past, he had set up the heavenly cycle star array, and he felt that it was already a top-notch array formation. Even with his current cultivation, he reckoned that his cultivation in the Tao of array formations was still inferior to the Demon Sovereign and Demon the Arch who had set up the heavenly cycle star array. However, compared to this chaos origin formation of good fortune, the heavenly cycle stars formation seemed to be nothing. There was a clear gap. When the time came, he only needed to set up this formation on Mount Buzhou. It could be said that other emperor kings wouldn't be able to kill their way in unless a celestial master took action. It could greatly increase the foundation of the human race. Although it wasn't easy to set up such an incomplete chaos origin formation of good fortune, it required a lot of treasures and wealth. However, many people didn't have the opportunity to spend treasures and wealth. The moment he saw the formation map, he also understood something else. It seemed that he had called everyone here as coolies. It didn't seem like there were any benefits at all. In fact, this formation map was the greatest benefit. It was just that he didn't show it. Everyone naturally understood the meaning behind it. Just this incomplete formation map of the chaos origin formation of good fortune was already a priceless treasure. Others couldn't even think about it. These celestial masters naturally couldn't let the emperor kings do things for them. They couldn't let the horses run and not eat grass at the same time. Everyone knew that such a thing wasn't reliable. Everyone should have seen your formation map. In the next period of time, everyone needs to familiarize yourself with your formation map. 10 days later, the chaos origin formation of good fortune will be activated. Before everyone comes out of seclusion, no one is allowed to leave without permission. Understand? Emperor Godrue glanced at everyone and then stared at Yishiwen. Understood, everyone said. They were quite satisfied with the invisible rewards given by the Fortune God dynasty. Their tone was also much better. Yishiwen originally wanted to leave and go to the endless starry sky to undergo the tribulation. After all, the Fortune God dynasty was definitely not a good place to undergo the tribulation. If he wasn't careful, he could destroy all living beings in a domain. The karma would be unimaginable. But now, he could only suppress it and think about it after this matter was over. In that case, everyone is dismissed. I will inform everyone again in 10 days. Emperor Godrue nodded slightly and said. As soon as he finished speaking, the figures of the emperors who were sitting in front of him disappeared one by one. Human race martial emperor. Emperor Godrue said coldly. His eyes flashed with a cold light, and his hands completely crushed the armrests of the throne. Chapter 33:41. A piece of shocking news spread throughout the Fortune Divine capital. The legendary primordial Fortune Grand Array was about to be activated, and no one was allowed to enter or leave during the activation period. As soon as this news spread, it was instantly like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. Because throughout the annals of history of the divine capital of creation, there were only a handful of times that the divine capital of creation had to be completely sealed off or even activate the creation chaos grand formation, and every single time it did, it would definitely cause a storm of blood. This was because there was no need to activate the primordial fortune grand array for trivial matters. Basically, the common people in the Fortune Divine Capital had never seen the primordial fortune grand array, and they had only heard of it in legends. It was just that, as long as the primordial fortune grand array was involved in the legends, it would inevitably lead to an earth-shattering bloody battle. With the Fortune Divine Dynasty's strength, it was almost invincible. Even those powerful experts from other domains couldn't kill their way into the Fortune Divine Capital. Many people had lived here for generations and had never heard of any problems with the safety of the Fortune Divine Capital. But now that the primordial Fortune Grand Array was about to be activated, how could they not be shocked? In fact, not only ordinary people, but even the high and mighty emperors were equally shocked. They had not received any news before this. With their status and identity, they were already the top merchants of the entire Fortune Divine Capital, and even the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty, but they still hadn't heard any news. This showed how strange this matter was. But even if they wanted to object, they couldn't do anything because those peak emperors who held the real power of the Fortune Divine Dynasty had already agreed to this matter. Even if they objected, it would be useless. At this time, they could even implicate those heavenly venerable experts who hadn't shown themselves for a long time. Once these top figures had agreed to something, no matter how dissatisfied they were, they couldn't change it. They were the true rulers of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Fortunately, although the divine capital of Fortune was just a city, it was ridiculously large. It was much larger than many continents. Although many people lived in the divine capital of fortune, that was already the range of their activities for the rest of their lives. That was their entire world, and it existed as a capital city. Those who had such a concept were all-powerful experts who had achieved great achievements in cultivation. For ordinary people, that was the entire world. Hence, the creation divine capital could satisfy all of its internal and external needs, especially in the short term. Basically, there wouldn't be any problems. If they did not communicate with the outside world for a long time, it would cause chaos. After all, this was the Fortune God dynasty's capital. Without the Fortune God capital, it was equivalent to the Fortune God dynasty losing its brain. Many things would become chaotic. The entire divine capital of fortune was under the protection of the Great Origin Creation Array. From afar, it seemed as though the massive divine capital of fortune had fallen into an environment shrouded in clouds and mist. In the endless clouds and mist, it was like a ferocious beast hiding in the clouds and mist, lying dormant and looking majestically in all directions, as if it wanted to devour everything cleanly. For a time, the entire divine capital of fortune fell into a state of panic because of the opening of the primordial fortune array. However, the ordinary people didn't feel that way because it wasn't a big deal to them. Only those with profound cultivation could sense that a storm was brewing. They also knew what kind of existence the Great Origin Creation Array was. Because of this, they could understand that when the Great Origin Creation Array was activated, they must be facing something extraordinary. However, it hadn't happened yet, so everyone wasn't very clear about it. They could only wait patiently. Above a high wall of the divine capital of fortune, Yishiwen was patrolling the area that he had to defend. The entire divine capital of fortune was enveloped by the great formation of fortune, and the area that he was responsible for defending was the outermost periphery. He was put in charge of the most dangerous area. To put it nicely, he was the strongest, so, of course, he should be in charge of the most important area. It had been more than a year since the grand formation was set up. Every day, it consumed a large amount of resources. Fortunately, the Fortune God dynasty had such a foundation. If it were the human race, they would probably collapse in a few days. In a year's time, everyone's crotch would be in danger of falling off. The divine dynasty's foundation was thousands or even tens of thousands of times stronger than the human race. Not to mention the human race, even the heavenly Tao sect, which had countless experts and even a heavenly venerate, could only serve under the Eastern heavenly venerate's command. They didn't dare to challenge the divine dynasty because the gap between the two sides was too big. During this year, Yishuan didn't care too much. He just kept cultivating and strived to improve his strength before the great change came. Huang Xiaolong could already smell the approaching danger, but he had his own plans. The chaos in the Fortune Divine capital might not necessarily be a bad thing for him. There were many good treasures in the Fortune Divine capital, and if he could fish in troubled waters, he might be able to obtain some benefits. A year passed, but the legendary disaster did not come as promised. This made many people feel that they were thinking too much. In fact, there was no danger, so there was no need to worry. However, the sudden change happened in an instant. In an instant, the Great Origin Creation Array that was originally maintaining its normal operation suddenly began to operate intensely. In an instant, the world changed color, and the world vitality was drawn over. Yishiwen suddenly opened his eyes. He opened his eye of heavenly Tao on the spot. His gaze penetrated the void, observing the 3 realms and 6 paths, and everything was in his eyes. He only saw an incomparably huge transmission array being activated. What was even more terrifying was that one figure after another came out of this huge transmission array. Army after army quickly assembled and quickly transmitted over. For a time, the entire sky was filled with battle cries. Yishiwen felt even more strongly that this was only happening on his side. In fact, similar teleportation arrays had suddenly opened all around the Fortune Divine capital, and people had been teleported over from the distant void. There's an invasion of foreign life forms. Yishuan immediately reacted. There must be an invasion of foreign life forms. In the entire Fortune realm, there was no force that could organize such a huge force to attack the divine dynasty. Only those restless emperors from the foreign domains could do it. But he was still a little puzzled. Had these emperors from the foreign domains gone crazy? The divine capital of Fortune was located in the most central area of the divine capital of Fortune dynasty. It rarely fought with others, but it didn't mean that the divine capital of Fortune was easy to capture. On the contrary, a considerable number of experts from the divine capital of Fortune had gathered here. If an ordinary army dared to approach the divine capital of Fortune, it would be a dead end. Even if they gathered an army from an entire domain and attacked continuously, it would still be very difficult to break through the divine capital of Fortune. Now that the Great Origin Creation Array had been activated, it was even more impregnable. What could they use to break through the divine capital of Fortune? However, Yishuan didn't have much time to think about it. The army of foreign creatures that had already assembled erupted with a tide-like attack. These attacks condensed together and swept down like a galaxy descending from the sky. Boom! These attacks fiercely fell into the primordial good fortune array, setting off stormy waves. The terrifying attacks set off circles of ripples. If this wasn't the primordial good fortune array, but some other array formation, it would have been destroyed in an instant. But even so, Yishuan could still feel that these terrifying attacks had caused the entire ground to shake. It should be known that the divine capital of Fortune had purchased many formations underground since its construction. So even if it encountered natural disasters, such as an earthquake, the divine capital of Fortune wouldn't be shaken in the slightest. Of course, with the strength of these big shots, it was impossible for them to cause such a situation to happen to the divine capital of Fortune. But one could still see the sturdiness of the divine capital of Fortune. Even so, it had begun to shake. It was clear how terrifying these attacks were. One after another, the attacks swept into the Great Origin Creation Array. Moreover, they didn't just attack one side, but from all directions. They surrounded the divine capital of Fortune and attacked together. Only in this way could the entire divine capital of Fortune be shaken. Of course, such attacks couldn't shake the Great Origin Creation Array. But this was just the beginning. As time passed, the transmission array's power was also activated to the limit. More and more siege troops appeared. One by one, the siege beasts that were as huge as mountains leaped out. With shocking roars, they rushed into the huge Great Origin Creation Array and trampled on it. Even a star wouldn't be able to withstand such a shocking trample and would be turned into powder. With the addition of these siege beasts, the Chaos Origin Fortune Grand Array immediately felt pressured. Following closely behind them, ancient battle fortresses emerged one after another. There were also talents among the foreign world's creatures. These battle fortresses looked rough, and many of them had sharp edges. However, in terms of power, they weren't any weaker than the Fortune Divine Dynasty's battle fortresses. In fact, they were even more powerful and were extremely terrifying. Each and every one of the war fortresses was densely packed like balls, sweeping out waves of energy towards the Fortune Divine Dynasty, completely crushing and sweeping away everything in their path. A series of attacks were unleashed one after another, causing the people of the Fortune Divine Capital to be dazed. Even though they had activated the Great Origin Creation Array, they had never imagined that they would encounter a battle of such scale here. This was the first time in their lives. Chapter 3342. Although the primordial fortune array of good fortune had already been activated, the people in the Fortune Divine Capital were obviously not fully prepared for a great battle. Hence, they were suddenly beaten into a daze. Fortunately, with the protection of the primordial fortune array of good fortune, there were no casualties. In addition, the people who could guard the Fortune Divine Capital were undoubtedly the elites among the elites. They were only stunned for a moment, but they quickly reacted. At this time, the foundation of the Fortune Divine Dynasty was suddenly revealed. The Fortune Divine capital, which was originally in a high state of tension, immediately reacted. One by one, the war fortresses hidden in the subplanes were pushed out. The gates of the subplanes' feeding grounds were opened, and powerful war beasts were driven out of them. Ancient arrays and boundaries that had been buried since the mythological era were all awakened. They carried terrifying shock waves and swept outwards. Dense and endless martial arts attacks were used. What splashed out from these arrays was not energy, but martial arts secret techniques that operated in the form of arrays. It must have been arranged by a top-notch master of matrix formations. It must have been a tyrannical and unique martial arts technique that had been arranged in the form of a matrix formation. This was an extremely wonderful idea. However, even if an ordinary person had thought of this, it would be impossible to accomplish it. This was because one must have unimaginable attainments in both matrix formations and martial arts. Even Yi Shiwen couldn't achieve this. Therefore, he speculated that it must have been arranged by a heavenly master-level master. The foundation of the Fortune Divine dynasty was profound. One could even see many peerless arrays arranged by heavenly masters. The martial arts secret techniques blasted out by these peerless arrays instantly killed into the army of foreign creatures, killing many masters on the spot. Yi Shiwen even saw that some of the martial arts lost techniques that had been blasted out of the array formations had even developed a bit of spirituality. Then, they directly transformed into human forms. They were like peerless martial arts masters, and were slaughtering the top experts of the foreign creatures in the sky. These martial arts secret techniques that were blasted out by the arrays actually had the strength of an emperor. Although they were only at the level of an early emperor, and their understanding of the Great Tao was certainly not as good as a real emperor, their attack power was not bad. Yi Shiwen was watching these changes from afar. He clicked his tongue in amazement. These martial arts attacks had inherited the will of those peerless and powerful experts. Some of them had even given birth to spiritual wisdom. They had reincarnated and cultivated to become peerless experts. However, seeing it with his own eyes, he still felt extremely shocked. The person who had arranged these formations was really a mess. Of course, Yi Shiwen wasn't admitting that he was inferior to them. It was just that he wasn't good at formations after all. He was at most a little stronger than an ordinary Emperor Lord. However, he was obviously inferior when compared to these professionals or even professional celestial masters. The real battle only began after the elite troops of the Fortune Divine capital reacted to the situation. The scale of both sides was unprecedentedly huge. The scene of tens of millions of soldiers killing each other was simply unimaginable. Even a small soldier was an existence that had already proven the Tao. Even ordinary people who had proven the Tao were not qualified to participate in the battle. One could imagine how much power the Fortune Divine dynasty had accumulated over so many years. Such a grand scene was impossible to see in the myriad heavens. Even if the Divine Court was invincible and number one in the world at that time, it was impossible to order Tao confirmation experts around like small soldiers. At the very least, they were at the level of a captain. It was impossible to be like the Fortune Divine dynasty. After all, the Divine Court had only existed for a few years, while the Fortune Divine dynasty had probably ruled the Fortune Divine dynasty countless years before the three races ruled the heavens. In the myriad worlds, humans, demons, and devils were powerful enough to proclaim themselves as kings and hegemons. But even if their entire race moved to the Fortune Divine dynasty, they would only be considered as an ordinary race and couldn't be considered as strong. Even with the human, demon, and devil races situation at that time, there were only a few Emperor Lords guarding the Fortune Divine dynasty. In the Fortune world, this kind of race was considered a mid-level race that had just escaped from the law of the jungle. The alien army came suddenly. In terms of numbers, they were far superior to the Fortune Divine capital. Their experts also had an advantage. The army formation was like a meat grinder, grinding the experts in the Fortune Divine capital to death. However, the experts in the Fortune Divine capital weren't inferior. This was the peak of the Fortune world, and also the gathering place of all the elites. With the protection of the Fortune Chaos Origin Array, they were able to hold their own against the invading foreign army for a time. Looking from afar, this was an extremely tragic battle. Hundreds and thousands of experts from both sides fell at every moment. They fell like dumplings. The blood they sprayed didn't stop for a moment and kept falling. Every drop of blood was as heavy as 1,000 caddies. It would take thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years, to nurture such a top-notch expert. However, it would only take a moment to destroy and slaughter them. It would be more than enough to wipe them out completely. The power of an individual seemed so frail in the face of such a large army. Regardless of whether they were at the immortal stage or the indestructible stage, or even the higher divine masters, divine kings, or even quasi-emperors, they were all meaningless in the face of such a large army. In the face of such a battle, only emperor lords could charge back and forth in the army and have the power to protect themselves. But if they wanted to run amok, they had to be at the peak of the emperor realm. Yi Shiwen was not in a hurry to attack. Yi Shiwen wasn't in a hurry to attack. Instead, he was contemplating. This matter felt strange no matter how he looked at it. He hadn't paid much attention to it when he had first activated the Fortune Immemorial Great Formation of the Fortune Divine Capital. He also didn't think that anyone could rush into the Fortune Divine Capital and cause trouble. Even the unimaginably powerful alien army was no exception. Even if they gathered an unprecedentedly powerful army and launched a surprise attack into the Fortune Divine Capital, they would still be courting death. In the world of cultivators, the so-called tactic of running 1,000 miles to kill the leader was simply a joke, unless one's strength far surpassed the so-called leader. Otherwise, running 1,000 miles into the enemy's territory was simply an act of courting death. No matter how muddle-headed the rulers of the Fortune Divine Capital were, they would not be like Liu Chan, who was so scared that he opened the door and surrendered at the sight of the army. As long as they could survive the initial storm-like attack, the experts of the other 5 regions would arrive and wipe them out in one fell swoop. At that time, even if the alien forces had the ability to reach the heavens, they could only nurse a grievance. The Fortune Divine Dynasty's elites were indeed in the Fortune Divine Capital, but did not mean that the Fortune Divine Dynasty only had these elites. Just the heavenly venerate abodes in the East, South, West, and North regions also had a large number of experts. There were also various aristocratic families and super sects that had to listen to the Fortune Divine Dynasty's command when necessary. Just these local forces alone had an endless army at their beck and call. So, this strategy seemed to be the best strategy, but it was actually courting death. But it was precisely because of this that everything seemed so strange. It wasn't difficult to figure out such a thing just by thinking about it. Logically speaking, there were still many intelligent people in the outer realms, and it was impossible for them to do such an unwise thing. If the alien forces' life forms were so stupid, they would have long been subdued by the Fortune Divine Dynasty. It was impossible for them to be in a deadlock with the Fortune Divine Dynasty for so long. If this was the case, then the behavior of the alien forces this time was worth discussing. They knew that there would be such a result, but they still did it. This showed that there must be a secret that he didn't know. The entire matter was extremely strange. From the very beginning, when Emperor God Ru Yi requested to open up the chaos origin formation of creation, there was already such a feeling. Then, as expected, Emperor God Ru Yi was right. There were indeed strong enemies from other regions who came to attack. Moreover, the powerhouses of the foreign domains also came even though they clearly knew that it would be suicidal to barge into the God of Fortune. Both sides seemed to have a tacit understanding. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but be very concerned about the suspicious points contained in this. There must be something that he didn't know, but the higher-ups of both sides obviously knew. What kind of riddle were both sides playing? This was what he wanted to know the most. Could it be that these heavenly venerates who were in closed-door cultivation had actually refined some kind of treasure? And in the end, these alien heavenly venerates got the news and came to attack even at the risk of being annihilated? Or perhaps there was some other secret that forced the alien heavenly venerates to take such a risk. These were all possible, but it really didn't make sense to take such a risk because there was no chance of winning. Even if there were no heavenly venerate experts in the Fortune Divine Capital, under the protection of the Fortune Primordial Array, it was impossible for them to attack the Fortune Divine Capital. It was even more likely that they would be surrounded by dumplings from behind. No matter how one looked at it, it was extremely uneconomical. However, Yishuan had too little information in his hands. He only had a few words. So, it wasn't enough to deduce the whole picture. In fact, this matter was so confidential that even a veteran sovereign emperor like the Battle Emperor wasn't qualified to know about it. And the reason why Emperor God Ru, he knew some of it was probably because she followed space-time heavenly venerate. In this way, it should be at least a heavenly venerate level secret. Yishuan thought for a long time, but still couldn't figure it out. So, he simply didn't want to think about it, and directly joined the battle. There would be a lot of rewards for killing these foreign creatures. Although he didn't fancy them, but he could transfer them to the human race. And the human race could also produce many experts because of this. The so-called foundation was accumulated bit by bit. Kill! Yi Shiwen shouted loudly and directly joined the battle. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.